And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
All right, attention to roll call.
All right, everybody. Good morning. 8:05 live Eastern Time and West Coast. Bright and early. Still dark outside. Listen, I'm wearing pink right now, supporting Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Unfortunately, I've known too many people have suffered from this. One of my best friends, his wife had to get her breast removed, so I've seen people suffer through this. So support breast cancer awareness. If you could donate, donate out there to breast cancer research. There's always new clinical trials coming out every day. So, support. I don't know if you want to give, when you go to Best Buy and when you make purchases, they always ask for money and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the best source. We don't really know where that money's going. But if there's a source that you have an opportunity to donate, I would. I always do. Hi, brother.
Yeah, my mother actually passed away from breast cancer in '99. So but I mean, it's gotten a lot better. It's a lot more survivable now. I know a lot of people who went on with their lives after getting it. Fortunately, when she had it, it was just bad. So yeah. But I 100%. Make sure you have wives or daughters, or even I'm hearing a lot of it popping up in guys too, dude. So if you find any like lumps on your breast or whatever on your pecs, check it out. So it's terrible thing.
Yeah, dude. I'm so sorry. I forgot to even mention that, of course, about your mother. I didn't know if you wanted to mention that, but so many people have suffered, and you lost your mother, and you're right. It has gotten so much better. I mean, every day there's different clinical trials that come out, and there's different cancer research. I always say it all the time. Honestly, I'd rather see a cure for cancer than a cure for HIV or other types of diseases that are preventable, because cancer is just, you never know. So make sure you're checking yourself out and taking care of yourselves. Anyway, on a lighter note, let's say good morning to everybody. Hassan, good morning, brother. Joe Mango, Scott, Kim R, Paul Haggerty. Kim R is new. Matt O'Brien, VSS Ventura, Mini B, Sherry, of course. Good morning, everybody. Let's get right into it. What do we got, John?
Yeah, before we do that, I think we got to even stay on a little somber note, though. Apparently, it's being reported by Borough Park News that a Transit District 34 officer committed suicide yesterday off duty at a parking garage. So, I don't have much of the details. I don't know who it is, but I got a lot of DMs saying it's a TD 34 guy. I didn't hear the name. I didn't check this morning yet. I'm going to look right now to see if there's any articles out about it. But Scott says to the guys and the girls in Transit District 4, to the family of the brother we lost yesterday, prayers. So, yeah, I just think we had to acknowledge that. It's just, it's actually a pandemic that's plaguing the NYPD that no one talks about. It's like crime. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Never happens. So, I think the jobs has been doing a lot to downplay suicides in the last few months. This is the second one in 3 weeks. So, I think just to point some light onto that.
I've been saying for a long time, and even when I spoke to several news reporters, you spoke to several news reporters yourself, and they will never quote us. And we both have been singing the tune that it's the internal pressures of the NYPD that are a major, probably the number one contributing factor for the pandemic of suicide when it comes to cops in the NYPD. I mean, cops are pretty resilient. For the most part, they have thick skin. They take on a job that they're willing to put themselves in a position that they may lose their life. They deal with, very aggravating public. They deal with anti-police rhetoric. They deal with anti-police sentiment. They deal with a legislation that doesn't support them. And cops are pretty resilient to that. I think we're all resilient to that. But what's the part that is really mentally deteriorating and really hurts on a cop's mental health is the internal pressures of the NYPD, that you're not getting support within. And especially look what's going on right now with this corruption probe of the upper echelon of the police department. The police department is pretty much running on autopilot. And we've done an episode prior about mental health on this podcast, and we always hear about issues with police officers or any rank. And yet there's no thorough And there's no actually transparent approach to mental health when it comes to the police department. Absolutely not. We've heard that there's notifications. We know about the early assistance unit, but I think that's clearly not enough done to actually help cops when it comes to mental health. And we actually need a better system in the police department. One in particular, I think that no cop should be in the same precinct for more than 5 years doing the same job, redundant and completely going unnoticed. There has to be, you need to break up the monotony, and we need support within the police department so police officers are not suffering from this pandemic. There's absolutely no support right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even in the mainstream media, so I'm looking for it. The only place I found it was Borough Park News. I'm not sure if that was the same news outlet that said that we were racist, but but that was the only place I saw a bunch of people send it to me, and a lot of people said that the guys from Transit District 34. So thoughts and prayers out to the family. If anybody has any details on it, send it to us. We'll report it because nobody else is going to. It's a damn shame. Yeah, I think. I was reading this morning early. I was reading like when I woke up in bed, and I'm just like I'm still just flabbergasted by all of the people that they appoint to these positions for health and wellness, for deputy commissioner of equity and inclusion, or whatever, OEL, whatever you want to call it, and then as well as who we were talking about for the appointment of police commissioner Jessica Tisch. I got to say, I did receive a lot of texts and calls over the weekend about Jessica Tisch. A lot of people that worked for her said she's a great boss. She doesn't take a salary. She's not fair to call her a billionaire heiress, but I totally disagree because she is a billionaire heiress. Obviously, she doesn't need the salary. She doesn't even take it. They also said that she had a lot of disabled people that work for her, that she would ensure they had Uber rides to and from work, and she actually paid for those Uber rides for her employees. And I said, I was like, I think that we gave a fair assessment when we spoke about Jessica Tisch. And what we said is we don't believe that she has the qualifications that she should be the police commissioner. We said that she would be a appointment of nepotism. It was only solely based around who her father is. I don't think we said anything about her character. I don't know her personally. Sounds like a great lady, but I'm sticking to my original statement. She has no business being the police commissioner. But in all fairness, neither did Ed Caban. So I mean, so in all fairness, I'll give it to that. I'll just say at least he should have understood what it was to be a cop. Eric, what do you think about that? She doesn't take a salary. She works for the city. Great person, right? She gets our employees Uber rides. She pays for them if they're disabled. The people that work for her, she fights for. She's not in the boys club. And the other thing that I was told is she's not corruptible either, which I'll say is definitely a big plus in this administration. But I think that it's anybody who's appointed to police commissioner should be incorruptible. Unfortunately, under Eric Adams, this doesn't seem to be the case. What do you think about that?
Well, if she's not corruptible, then she shouldn't be the police commissioner. Absolutely. When it comes to the Eric Adams administration. No, but again, this comes down to what we always talk about, and we've coined the phrase when it comes to the NYPD, it's the nice guy syndrome. Now, she happens to be a woman, but it's the symptom and the phenomenon of this job. It's the nice guy syndrome. Oh, she's so nice. She's good to her employees. She's good to her people. She's so nice. She gets some Uber rides. She doesn't pay. Now, I'm going to stick by exactly our position, what we both said, that she has no business being the police commissioner of the police department. I think we gave a very fair assessment. I don't think we knocked her character at all. I think you and I both actually said, let's not knock her for being a billionaire heiress. That's not a knock on her. That's the reality. She is a billionaire heiress, and we're saying that how could she relate to police officers that live a modest lifestyle? And I still support that. The fact that she could actually work and not take a salary actually solidifies that she's a billionaire is what we said. Now, is that a kind gesture? Absolutely. I think it's fantastic. And we both said that she may have led, she may have done a great job, but it's compartmentalized to specific technology. But now we're talking about being the actual police commissioner for the most iconic and largest police department in the world with zero boots on the ground police experience, which is absolutely a huge problem, especially when it comes to the NYPD. The NYPD is a complete different animal than any other police department in the world. Most police departments have tried to mirror and tried to mimic the operations of the NYPD, but it's a complete different facet. I mean, this is at this point, so it's a diminished police department compared to what it normally is, but you're policing 8.5 million people and probably even double during Christmas time with the amount of tourists that we have. So this is very unique. Yeah, she might be a nice lady. I'm not saying she's not. I think we give a very fair assessment. We're not knocking her character. And this is the problem again with the police department. Immediately cops defend someone's character. Okay, have the tools, and does she have the ability to lead the most iconic police department? I think not, and we stand by that position. And I'm glad that we stand by that position. We're not going to a waiver because she's a nice person. There's a lot of nice people on the job. I heard Ed Caban is a really nice guy. I heard Ed Caban's a cool guy. I heard Ed Caban's a great guy to go out with. I hear great things about him. Again, and he was the most insignificant police commissioner. So if he was the most insignificant police commissioner with the amount of police experience that he has, and that was an epic fail, how can we expect anything better from Jessica Tisch that doesn't have any boots on the ground experience? Absolutely not.
Well, he might go down as the most notorious police commissioner too. That's yet to be seen. So let's see what happens with that one. Very possible. I mean, he did some dirty stuff, especially towards this podcast. Myself. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So and the reason I'm even bringing her up again is not to even speak about that. You know, it is what it is. Like I thought it was a fair assessment when we gave. You know, and but the reason I'm bringing it up it's because people have been put in place traditionally in this department that have no business to be. And how this relates to suicide is I was reading a court case this morning. There was a court case about a cop, and he's fighting for his religious exemption, right, to be approved. And so we had done that episode a while back with Tanya Meisenholder. Tanya Meisenholder started her career as a criminal analyst in the NYPD, right? She was a Louisiana girl, grew up in Louisiana, worked for Louisiana Police Department, went to LSU, was a crime analyst in for the Louisiana State Police, I believe. Then she interned with the ATF. She worked in upstate New York, crime analyst, New York City, crime analyst, right? She gets from crime analyst to like some type of supervisor, but basically all of her work in the NYPD is analyzing 61s. She's a crime analyst. Same thing with Jessica Tisch before she makes deputy commissioner. And then she goes from crime analyst to she's the chief of staff of Ben Tucker in the First Steps office. She has zero experience and zero training in OEO other than what you get in the academy, what you get yearly. Oh, you can't sexually harass people. That is the only training she gets, Office of Equal Opportunity Employment. So she by all means doesn't understand the law. She hasn't properly been trained. She has zero experience in it. And she goes from that position she becomes assistant commissioner for EEO, and then she becomes the deputy commissioner of equity and inclusion. And when I was reading the court case, I'm like, wow, isn't that funny? So it's like crime analyst Jessica Tisch, crime analyst Tanya Meisenholder, crime analyst Rebecca Weiner, right? And I'm looking at all this, and I'm like, you don't see the trend here, people. It's always people tied to the Democratic Party, civilians who step into the police work as crime analysts, and then they're your boss and they're telling you what to do. I'm not saying that they're not nice people. Being nice has nothing to do with it. What I'm saying is they're completely unqualified. So at the time that she's in charge of equity and inclusion and then denying thousands of officers of religious exemptions illegally, by the way, she has no back knowledge of the law or religious exemptions. And that same will hold true when we get to the health and wellness section, right? These people have no training, no experience. There's no reason why they should be in this field where now they're helping cops, where they're going to stop suicide. I mean, I think we could all say the job's been very poor at helping the morale of the men and women in the NYPD. And again, just look at how the morale is now. The morale's awful. It's in the toilet bowl. We're losing cops left and right. We just had an officer, it's rumored to be 1 year on the job in Transit District 34, who took his own life. And instead of even acknowledging that it's a problem, there's fake handles coming on my account saying, what did he do it for? How do you know it was related to the job? It's like, oh, no, I don't know. You're right. I don't know. It might not be, but why are all these cops killing themselves? Might not be. I don't know. I know a lot of accountants. I don't know any that committed suicide. I know a lot of doctors. I don't know any that committed suicide. I know a lot of cops, and I know a lot of cops that committed suicide. So, and what the job's real response is to continue to put all this bull crap out on social media, which they did, by the way. So that it confirms to me that, in fact, it was a cop, because Health and Wellness put a post out that if you need to talk to someone, here's the numbers. If you don't want to talk to the job, call these people. So that confirms to me that there actually was a suicide in the NYPD, and the rest of it's ignore. Continue to just put out the nonsense and ignore and pretend like nothing's going on. No one's leaving the job. Everyone loves it. Everything's fine inside the NYPD, and there's not a suicide problem. And 1 year on the job, Eric. 1 year on. What do you think about 1 year on the job?
Well, so you and I talk about this all the time, right? And I say, is it interesting, right? We've actually interviewed people on this podcast. We talk about mental health. Is it interesting that you take the average person that becomes a New York City police officer? For the most part, they pass a psych exam. They don't suffer from any mental illness in their life. They don't have any. For the most part, any diseases of alcoholism, any drug use, which is why they become New York City police officers, and they pass the psych exam and they pass the test. They're of good physical health, good mental health, emotional health, and they become New York City police officers. Most of these people have never seen a psychiatrist in their entire lives. Maybe now with this whole DI movement and lowering standards to actually have recruitment, but from what I know, the background check that I went through, the background check that you went through, John, and the majority of people that become New York City police officers, it's extensive background check. If you talk to a psych doctor in your lifetime, that could hold you up from becoming a New York City police officer. So we know that the men and women that become New York City cops are free from any mental health issues, but yet there's a huge transition for many that become New York City police officers, that their mental health completely deteriorates. And we see that numerous police officers become suicidal that were never suicidal before. We know this because we speak to cops on a constant basis, even cops that we interview, and cops that just speak to on a constant basis that just confide in John and myself because they don't have any support out there and there's no resources. And what do we hear time and time again? Cops are suicidal. They want to hurt themselves. They want to kill themselves. And never did they ever have these emotions or have these thoughts prior to becoming New York City police officer. So if we had, it's just a one-off incident, yeah, we could say maybe they have some issues going on at home. But when we have a pandemic as such as we have numerous police officers taking their own lives, we have to admit there's a huge problem with the police department. There's nothing being done about mental health. It's absolutely the internal pressures of the NYPD. It's a diminished police department. These cops are working day in and day out. They have no time off. They have no consideration. They have supervisors that talk to them like crap. They could care less if they actually see their families. They could care less if they have sleep. They could care less if they're actually properly taken care of. And again, Patrick Donahue puts a great comment here. The stigma of seeking mental health help. The stigma of seeking mental health help is so persuasive in law enforcement that most seek self-help for fear of being assigned to the rubber gun squad. You're absolutely right. But, there has to be a stigma removed. We actually have to help these cops and not put a stigma. And the fact that people are attacking you, John, that you want to help them just shows that they want to play pretend and not acknowledge the actual issue. That most cops that are suicidal, that want to hurt themselves, never had these emotions prior to becoming a New York City cop. And it's the New York City Police Department is the majority contributing factor to police officers taking their own lives. It's absolutely ridiculous that this is not being addressed. We had Inspector Watcher that actually works with mental health. He was involved in an incident where he completely missed the mark and didn't act as a cop, where he had an adversary in his custody, or at least he tried, to put handcuffs on an adversary, and that person fled. And we talked about this podcast. So I say to Inspector Watcher out there, what are you going to do about mental health moving forward? What are you going to do to save the lives of our fellow brothers and sisters? We actually have to start supporting the cops. Right now, we can't depend on legislation. You can't depend on the politicians. You can't depend on the media. You can't depend on the optics. So we have to depend on what's going on within. We need real leadership that actually cares about the cops and cares about their own, so that we don't have cops killing themselves and taking their own lives. 1 year on the job. Don't tell me that his entire life, everything was fine. And if you're telling me, John, if what they're saying, it has nothing to do with the job, they're saying that we hired someone that was suicidal and had mental health issues. And if that's the case, then we have another problem.
100%. Eric, we're going to have to improvise a little bit. You're going to have to keep your responses short because your stalling is absolutely awful. Keep them to like 60 to 2 minutes. The stalling's not working too good today.
I got some kind of obstruction going on.
I think Elon Musk stalling sucks. That's just what I think. That's just what I think. It's decent. It's all right. It's just not good for streaming. It needs to get better. So it works good in perfect weather. Anytime there's any weather or you're dealing with weather, it's just not good. But no, I agree with you, dude. And speaking of Tanya Meisenholder, we'll bring this up again. Is we did a podcast about it. I forget what it was called, like an analysis of equity and inclusion or whatever. If anybody wants to watch it, it's definitely worth a watch. And she was on a podcast, so we watched the podcast that she was on, and she literally talked about how, because they want more diversity in the police department, they don't know what the diversity goal is. There's no goal. They just want more diversity, whatever the hell that means. So, we don't know what the goal of diversity actually is, but we want more of it. So because of that, they decided that they're gonna dumb down the psych exam. So if you dumb down the psych exam and you allow people that have used drugs, you allow people with psych issues, you allow people that are on psychotic medication to take a very stressful job where they will not get a lot of days off, and the overtime is a big problem, unlike what Chief Terrence Monahan was like, yeah, when I was a cop, I loved overtime. I don't know what these guys' problems is. But like, when he, like, that's not, your overtime's totally different. Your overtime's totally, you guys got days off. You were able to take days off. These guys are only getting the vacation that they're taking. And let's not forget, they don't have that. They don't get 5 weeks vacation for a long time. So only out of a year, out of 365 days, you have 5 weeks where your life is your own. Other than that, the rest of the time, you are a slave to the New York City Police Department. Let's just call it what it is. And that's a big problem. But I think if somebody with a year on the job committing suicide, we have to look back at that psych interview. We have to look back at it. And all of those things might be true. Still doesn't matter. It's still going to be the internal pressures that ultimately got him. But it's because of lowered standards, and it's because of lowered standards coupled with the intense pressure that's never been seen before in policing. So this is why these things are happening, and especially to young cops.
You nailed it, brother. It's absolutely right. With 1 year on the job, we have to look at what were the issues. You're absolutely right. Because if we did lower standards because of a diminished police department to allow people that should not become police officers, then that's a liability. And the police department, just a profession on its own, could be a contributing factor to a police officer taking his or her own life, or her own life. Absolutely. If they already are vulnerable and they don't have the emotional mindset to deal with police work and to deal with the internal pressures of the NYPD, because even in a good administration, not under the situation that we're in right now, the internal pressures of policing can be daunting enough for someone if they're not of emotional sound mind. So absolutely, that's something that we have to look at. 1 year on the job, it's very concerning.
Yes, again, so this came out from Borough Park News. This is the crime scene. And obviously, like I said, Health and Wellness did put out that post. So, I mean, that basically confirms it for me, is that happened. Yeah, terrible. And yes, whoever was asking, it's Mark Wachter that we were talking about. And we actually did an episode where we broke down an incident that he was involved in. And he was actually complaining, well, what about my mental health? Dude, really? Seriously? Seriously? You're one incident? You're worried about we should be worried about your mental health when these dudes are involved in 20, 30 a night and nobody's asking a question about how they feel. It's like, I'm not really concerned that you took a little bit of criticism. It's all right. You make $200,000 a year. You have a tit job, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, what did you think about that?
You know what's interesting about the police department and this administration? So, according to the disciplinary matrix, the higher in rank that you get, that's an aggravating factor when it comes to discipline, because you're supposed to withstand more and you're supposed to be experienced, right? So, what did that also correlate to your experience having? Shouldn't you have thicker skin? The higher in rank that you go in this job, you have more time in the job, more experience, you hold more rank. You should have thicker skin. And yet, it's interesting, there's no support for the police officers, but the higher in rank we go, we see people like Inspector Mark Watcher that can't handle a little criticism, while he's been fortunately tucked away in a position where he did not have to do boots on the ground police work for many years. And we see Eric Adams, who cannot handle any criticism himself, who lashed out at an older woman during a town hall meeting, an older Jewish woman, and he lashed out at her and totally disrespected her. But yet, we expect the police officers to be the toughest human beings, and the thickest skin. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's horrible, man. And again, I think the problem always leads back to just putting inexperienced nepotism babies in charge of things they have no business being in charge of, and they're not particularly good at, by the way. So being a nice person is great. It's still not right. And again, I'm going to stick to the thing that Tanya Kinsella, I'm sorry, not Tanya Kinsella. She was a horrible appointment to First Step as well, but I wasn't talking about her. But Jessica Tisch would be a horrible appointment as police commissioner. Just like I'm saying Rebecca Weiner was a horrible appointment for counterterrorism. Just like Tanya Meisenholder was a horrible appointment for equal opportunity or whatever, equity inclusion at this point. And it's funny, we talk about mental health. I actually know, I'm just like going back to the mandate, and I know someone that worked inside of health and wellness. They worked inside of health and wellness. They were getting put pressure onto the mandate, and the psychologist would walk in every morning and say, "How's everyone doing? How's everybody doing?" Right? Like, she's the psychologist for the department. And this person was sitting there on the computer one day, 7 days away from losing her job, looking for a house in Florida, trying to determine what she was going to do for the rest of her life. So she's like, I'm doing great. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to feed my family the rest of my life, and where I'm going to live and where I'm going to work and what I'm going to do. But everything's good. And she's like, okay, have a great day, toodles. And she just walks away, the psychologist. So that whole unit's an absolute joke. It's at this point, it's a big waste of money. And when we, you know what's funny about that unit too? When we did that episode, all the people from that unit that were like, you guys better not do this. It's like, really? We better not give our opinion? Like, nah, I'm going to give my opinion. Like, you better not say that. I'm like, I thought part of your thing was, if it mattered to you, if it mattered to me, it mattered to you. I thought that was like your motto. If it mattered to me, it matters to you. So, but this matters to me, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. And that's how they treat cops. Oh, we're going to tell you that anything that you're concerned with, we care. We value your voice. Your opinion matters. There's always someone to talk to. Oh, but we're not going to talk about that. Oh, you're feeling suicidal? Time out. Oh, wait, what? The job's beating you up? Oh, time out. We can't talk about that. Oh, wait, you're getting pressure to summons a bar because they're not paying their VIG? Oh, time out. We can't talk about that. Oh, wait, the NYPD is involved in serious corruption? Oh, no, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about any of those things. So the mental health apparatus in the NYPD is a joke. The fact that they haven't acknowledged that an officer has committed suicide is a joke. And the fact that mainstream media is not reporting on it is another absolute joke. So
Scott says Mark was a good cop, but 100% by the book, and he drank the Kool-Aid from day one. His brother, a real piece of work, Went to IAB as a cop because patrol was too tough. Listen, I only had one opportunity to make an assessment if Mark Wachter was a good cop or not. We saw the video. We saw how he handled an adversary. And clearly, to me, there was no signs that he was ever a cop. Now, we didn't expect him to run after a perpetrator by himself and leave his post and put himself in a precarious situation, be extremely vulnerable. But we did see his tactics when he had a potential perpetrator in his presence, and they were just terrible. So no signs to me that he was ever a cop. But anyway, he's in a position where he could actually make some real change when it comes to mental health. And we were hoping that with our criticism that maybe he would put his finger on it. But clearly, listen, Mark Wachter, if you're watching this, and maybe people will get this message out to you, we need something done immediately. No longer can we wait. We need something done immediately. We have a cop with 1 year on the job taking their own life. Clearly, there's a problem. Either there's a problem in the candidate assessment hiring process, or there's a problem that someone with 1 year on the job, that the police department is so difficult right now, absolutely no support, that they're taking their own lives with 1 year on the job. This is a huge problem. If this isn't done right now, this is a huge red flag. Then we'll never get this problem taken care of.
Yeah. Life after the job says, I hated as a supervisor during the summer months seeing finest messages saying no excuses, slaves. It wasn't just the summer months, man. It was all the time, dude. You know, summer was the worst, but I mean, it's all the time. I mean, especially now with these nightly illegal protests that happen where they take over streets, subway stations, basically shut down streets and blocks, and you can't walk down the block and you can't go on the street. All these things that happen nightly now in New York City, we've never had that. So it's detail season all year round. It's not just the summertime. It's not just during the holidays. It's not just during, everything that you want to be home with your family for. It's not just all those times. It's every day now on the streets of New York. So there's never any excuses. And now there's a completely diminished department. And the NYPD is, again, lying about those numbers. There's not 36,000 cops. It's not even close. And so what is being happened is there's never any excuses. So you can never take a day off. You're always working, and you're always being ordered overtime when you're supposed to be off. And that's weighing in. I mean, I know that there were times that not only did it affect my mental health, it affected my physical health as well, which was like, I like being in the police department is like a consistent grind. I mean, and that's why you look at a lot of these cops and they look like messes. They're fat. Their uniforms are dirty. They look like they haven't got a haircut. They look like they haven't shaved, is because they didn't prioritize things. And like, in order for me to prioritize me staying in shape, looking clean, and staying neat, I mean, I took significant time away from my family because there were plenty of times I was only home for 4 or 5 hours, and I should have been sleeping. Instead, I was in the shower cleaning myself, or thankfully my wife was with me almost the whole time. She would clean my uniforms and all that other stuff. You know what I mean? Because I was an absentee husband and an absentee father for, I think, the majority of my career.
Tom Anthony says, you will never know if this person had mental issues due to privacy laws. Now, I'll say yes and no. So if someone is in mid-career and they start having mental issues because of the police department and they start seeing a psych doctor because of HIPAA laws, that may be kept confidential. We may not know. But someone with a year on the job, during their investigation, their background check for candidate assessment, they would have to disclose their medical records, and those issues would have been highlighted. Because I remember myself, and John, I'm sure you remember yourself, during the recruitment process, we had to disclose if you were seeing a psych doctor, or if you did it any time, if you took any drugs, any pills, something you had to disclose. I also, there's something else I wanted to talk about if it comes back to my memory here. But it just I just lost my train of thought with it. But I definitely, because I think that's important to highlight. I think someone with a year on the job, I find it hard to believe that in 1 year, their complete mental apparatus changed from someone that was healthy, emotionally sound, someone had good mental health, that in 1 year completely changed. Unless something was so catastrophic in their life, and I can't think of anything that's so significant unless they have something personal going on. but I would put my money on it that it's something to do with police department. And again, the internal pressures. Patrick Jordan, good morning. Great friend to the podcast. Former chief in Los Angeles County. Check him out. Fatigue is a contributing factor to suicidal thinking. Add PTSD and you've got real problems. Absolutely nailed it. Great comment.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, again, we're going to say it. It is the insanity that's going on out inside of New York City, the insanity inside of the New York City, the police department, the complete lack of care for really anybody. Their employees are treated like they're peasants. You see these guys running around with their embroidered stuff. They look at people like they're robots, and they actually respect the drones. The drones and the robots are probably treated much better than the regular officers. So it's that coupled with the fact that they lowered standards, and they didn't just lower standards physically. They lowered standards when it comes to your character. They lowered standards when it comes to your psyche. And you can, like I said, we could clearly go back to that podcast where Tanya Meisenholder narrows in on that, on how they had a problem hiring a diverse group of candidates because more often than none, people of color failed the psych. So they went back, and what'd they do? What'd they do to alleviate that? They lowered standards on the psych, right? And does that mean they lowered standards just for black and brown people? No. It means they lowered standards across the board. So what you're going to see is people come into the profession that shouldn't be cops, and they're coming into the profession at the height of insanity in the profession, where people who are built to handle it are saying, you know what, screw you, I'm going to do something else. Screw you, I'm not working for you. You know what I mean? And like, so you couple those two things together, and that's why you're seeing a spike in suicide, and that's why you're seeing officers leave at dramatic paces. I mean, if you look at the retention rate in the NYPD, it's actually awful. Not like the chief of personnel actually testified to in city council. The retention rate is horrendous. It's horrendous. You look at every class it's still active in the NYPD, including the recent ones, and they're about under 60%, all of them. So and then, obviously if you go back in time, but like, I'm talking about prior to people hitting their 20 years. I'm not even talking about people in the 20-year range. I'm talking about people prior to hitting their 20 years. The retention rate's about 60%. That is awful. So that means half of the people that you recruit leave.
So there's no secret about it, right? I blame 99% of the issues of the police department or any organization on leadership, and I'm going to stand by that. 99% of the issues, the cops, the boots on the ground, they're doing their job as they're paid and trained to do, and as they're evaluated. Now, when it comes to, I would see, for instance, issues even when the administration was good, but it's only getting worse. But the lack of compassion when it comes to the leadership, I never forget, John, I wonder if you experienced the same thing. I would notice the pressure that they would put on the admin lieutenants. It was absolutely ridiculous. Of course, the admin lieutenant was always left to be the bad guy, and it's completely unfair. But the borough, at 5, 6 o'clock at night, or sometimes even later, because by the time they got around to it, would leave a stack of notifications and details for the admin lieutenant to distribute to the police officers to address for the following morning for some type of detail. So here you are. You're a police officer, and by the time that notification gets to you, it's 10 o'clock at night, and you have to be at some detail at 4 in the morning. Now, if you're a woman, you might have to figure out how you're going to take care of your kids, how your kids going to be taken care of, or maybe even if you're a man, now you have to straighten situations out. You don't even have time to go home and get a full night's sleep. And they drop these notifications for some detail last minute. Meanwhile, the people in the borough, they drop at 5, 6 o'clock at night, and then they leave. They run out the door. They go home and enjoy their weekend. And the admin lieutenant is stuck with this stack of details and notifications to hand out to the cops. And the admin lieutenant can't even show the cops compassion because he has to fill these spots, or she has to fill these spots. Absolutely fair leadership, and we've seen it time and time again. Did you ever see that?
I ever see it? I mean, that was an every week thing. That was every Friday. Every Friday, you figure, because the admin lieutenant works Monday to Friday usually, or they're off. They're either off Saturday, Sunday, or they're off Sunday, Monday, or they're off Friday, Saturday. But traditionally, the admin lieutenant works Monday to Friday, and then Friday 5 o'clock, comes down all the details from the borough, which came down from operations right after the planning. So now the admin lieutenant, right before he's about to leave, is scrambling and hitting people before they're about to leave and hitting people as they come in and basically just destroying everybody's regular days off. So, and I spoke about it before, and like what I did to keep myself sane is I would make plans, but my plans were never fulfilled. Like I never had plans after work. If I did, they were like, I'll see what time I get out because I don't know if I'm making an arrest. I don't know if I'm getting stuck on a job and it's going to require me to be there to do 49s when I'm a supervisor. I don't know if I'm getting stuck on a job when I'm a cop. Doesn't matter. You're a cop, you're a supervisor. You don't know you're not getting stuck that night. If you know you're not getting stuck that night, you're not doing your job. That's the bottom line. If you know you go into work and you're like, I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, you're not doing. You're not fully invested in the NYPD. You can't tell me any different. So that's it doesn't matter where you are. So in order to alleviate that, I never made plans that were consistent. I was like, well, if I get out, I'll come. I don't know if I'm getting out. And then the same thing for my weekends. Well, if I'm off, I'll come. But I don't know that I'm off. So it was always like, and my family hated it. My friends hated it. But it was the only way that I could keep myself sane because I didn't want to like get happy or excited to do something either after work or on my RDOs. And then last minute, right before I'm about to go there, I can't go. So so the only times I really had solid plans were when I was off for five weeks of my vacation time, and now like we said, your first 5.5 years or even 6 years now, whatever it is at this point, you only get, I believe, 3 weeks vacation. So it's only 3 weeks out of the year where you're actually able to have a plan. And then, in your traditional role, that's always upended as well. Because even if you work, say, a 4 to 12 or a 9 to 5 or a midnight shift, you could get flopped around anyway. They could be like, well, today we don't need you to come in at that shift. We need you to come in at this point. We need you to report here. And like, so your whole week's getting flipped around. And then when you're supposed to get off, that's getting flipped around. And that definitely hinders people's mental wellness and well-being because and obviously, and even your physical, right? Because you're not eating properly, you're not on a schedule, you don't know if you're coming or going, and that messes people up. And I always seen that even when suicide wasn't as prevalent as it is today. I always seen people getting messed up because of their schedules. So it's terrible. Yeah, that's a common theme, even with things as stupid as the Thanksgiving Day parade, because that parade's coming. Those details should have been out like early in the month. All right, John, you're going to Thanksgiving parade. Okay. Right? You have a month to plan and prepare for that. Like, why are you telling me the day before? You know what I'm saying?
I don't want to get totally off topic, but I think it's a great discussion. So I see some of our friends and listeners going back and forth, and some are supporting that the college requirement, and some are saying different here. Now, I'm going to give my perspective. I would say that I have a college degree myself, and I can tell you right now, I don't think a college degree is necessary at all to become a New York City police officer. I think that college itself is good on certain levels. It teaches you how to learn, right? Which is why I think that when you have 2 years military, it's acceptable in comparison to 60 college credits, because what you learn in the military, which I think is amazing, is they teach you how to learn. You learn how to learn, right? And which I think is what college teaches you, right? Do you actually learn more than someone else? Not necessarily, but you learn how to learn. And that's why I think when it comes to, John, when we talk about Mike Yanisic with the promotional courses and George Mifsud, why those two were so effective is because they taught you how to learn the material to pass these tests. So I'm going to say I see people going back and forth. As a college graduate, I do not think it's necessary. I think you can be self-taught and self-read. Some of the most intelligent people I've ever met are not college educated. I don't think it should be a requirement. I think it's not necessary to become an effective police officer. I think the police department could offer some writing courses to write reports. They could offer seminars on communication skills. Leadership is a skill. They could have leadership courses. I think you could do it without college.
I'm not a fan of college at all. I mean, I've told you people all before. I'm not. I technically I have the college credits, but I'm not going to sit here and say I'm college educated. I'm self-educated. Like I'm not. I've been working since I was eligible to work. I was working before I was eligible to work. And I always thought, honestly, the better cops were the people. And I was still on the job when I came on the job. There was still people. There was a lot of people on the job that just had high school diplomas. And I thought they were great cops. And I thought if you compared them to the college kids, there's zero comparison. They were better cops. They were much better cops. They were much better at dealing with the public. They were much better at dealing with criminals. Did they write as nice reports? No, they didn't. No, they didn't. That's something that could be learned. I agree with you 100%. Were they grammatically the best people? No, they weren't. But were they good people? Were they people that you want when you dial 911 to come to your house? Absolutely, they were. Absolutely. And you couple that with the I would always laugh. I would always say for the last like 10 years, everybody's a genius on this job now. Everybody's the smartest guy in the room now. Everybody's a genius, and it's like that whole, I went to this school and I did that. It's like, okay, but you're a moron. Okay. You went to this school and you went to that school and you went to this school, and there's a lookout on the roof and there's a lookout on the ground, and you have no idea what's going on. You're having a conversation with the guy on the ground while he's yelling up to the lookout on the roof to tell everybody to get out of the building, and like you don't know what's going on in the streets around you. So it's like, great, you went to Harvard, nobody's impressed when you're on the streets in New York City. It's like, okay, you went to an Ivy League school, okay. You know how many times I got that from people, and I was like, okay, but I'm your boss and I make more money than you. So who's the idiot? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know why you're even telling me where you went to school. Like, what does that have to do? Oh, what? You're smarter than me? Oh, okay. Oh, well, I make more money than you, and I'm your boss, and so you're going to do what I told you to do. Oh, okay. That's who won those arguments. I did. And yeah, I think for 100%, college is good. I think everybody should further continue their education. But I'm going to be the first to say the smarter people I know in life didn't go to college. And that's because they're able to think. I always say that they're less indoctrinated. They think outside of the box more. They have more life experience. And I was like, it would always laugh to me. Oh, well, they went to college. I was like, okay, so they went to college and they drank and they smoked pot for 4 years and they were given information that they regurgitated back to professors. So that makes them smarter than me, who's actually out in the world working, supporting themselves, living on my own, paying my own bills, budgeting my own thing. That makes them better than me. Oh, okay. Because their parents paid for 4 years of school. I get it. Okay.
You know what I want to know? When it comes to someone that becomes a cop, I want to know, did they get a New York City street kid education? That's what I want to know. And I can tell you right now, the best education you can get on the streets of New York City, and I don't know about now, but I remember back then, John, maybe you can tell the same thing. I used to say the best education I would get in New York City is hanging out at the handball courts. You hang out at the handball courts when you're a kid, you'll learn a lot. You talk to different kids. I tell you what, you better stand up for yourself, because there's plenty of fist fights that break out the handball courts. So especially if you're going to become a New York City cop, I would say that's the best education. Can you take a punch? Because I met so many police officers that never even got into a fist fight in their entire life. Now, I'm not saying you should go out there and start fights, but you're going to be a New York City police officer. At some point, you have to take a stand. You're going to be a protector. You have to take sides when it comes to certain things. And yet I've met people that they went their entire lives without ever having to stand up for anything. So, hey, maybe they were nice people, but were you good? Did you actually stand up for someone, or stand up for yourself, or stand up for someone else? The fact that you went your entire youth in New York City and never had a fist fight or had to protect yourself, kind of question some things. Like I said, you shouldn't go out there and start fights. That's not what I'm saying. But at some point, you should have had to protect yourself or stand up for someone. Patrick Jordan says, I found work history is more important than a college education. Absolutely. Work history is very important. You get life experience, how to deal with people. And that's what happens when you become a New York City police officer. You deal with people. You have to have compassion for people. That, I think, is the number one thing to be a New York City police officer, is just understanding people. Understanding, especially New York City, a diverse metropolis like New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, there's who's the kid that's in city council right now? Can't think of Keith Powers, right? Keith Powers went to college. He's in charge of city council. I forget what he's actually. I think he's a chair of I forget what committee. But he went to college. He lives in Upper Manhattan with his mother. He's 36 years old. He's not a self-sufficient person, whatever. He has no business being in government. And I'm going to say right now, he has no business becoming a cop either. Right. So you take a kid like that and you're going to say, oh, that's the police officer we should have. We should have a guy like Keith Powers, whose mom still wipes his ass and does his laundry, can't pay his own bills, lives in the lap of luxury and has no idea anything about New York City. He doesn't understand different cultures, different communities, but he's in New York City Council, and you want that guy to be a cop? No. Give me a kid that grew up hanging out in the park, that worked in the delis when he was a kid, that when he was eligible to work, worked for a living, understands the street, took the train, took the bus, did all of those things. That person's going to be a good cop in New York City. Corruption Connection says it right here. There are housing cops who have never once stepped foot in a project building. Recipe for disaster. There's also transit cops who have never ridden the train, the subway in New York City. Recipe for disaster. And we've seen it clear as day. Everybody remembers that. Everybody remembers that case. That kid should still be alive. Chinese kid, rookie. They throw him in the housing projects. He's in traditionally violent housing projects, but he's so scared that he has his gun out. Now, I have no problem with someone taking their gun out and keeping it by their side. I don't. If there's some reason that you think you could encounter danger, I'm not going to judge what you think you should know danger. I have no problem with it. But he's so scared that when a kid walking with his girlfriend kicks open or just opens the project door upstairs in a hallway, coming down the staircase, the doors are loud. Boom! Opens the door. This kid, so scared, he pulls the trigger on the gun. He has it like this. He pulls the trigger. The bullet bounces off the railing, skips up the railing, strikes the individual in the heart. Just a kid opening the door going down the stairs. Should have never happened. You know what the easier way to never have that happen is? Have a kid from Brooklyn who grew up there be a cop there. Have a kid who understands there be a cop there. Right? Instead of taking, listen, and let's just call it what it is. He was a 105-pound Chinese kid who, was scared to death. Just that the person that's going to keep you safe in the housing projects? Is he keeping anyone in the community? He can't even keep himself safe. He's scared to death. He's holding a gun, and he gets to the point where his finger hits the trigger. Now, did he mean to kill anyone? No, he didn't. It was a recipe for disaster, and that's exactly why that happened, is because he had no business being there and no business holding a gun to begin with. They put me one time. They put me during my sergeant didn't like me when I was in Impact. Because he liked a girl that liked me. So I didn't like it. It was the craziest thing. And I'm like, I don't even like this girl. I don't know why you're coming after me. But he liked her. He was married, but he still liked her. But so he sent me to the ferry for about a month while right after the Japan bombing, where they did the gas, where they threw the gas in the subways. So they put me on the ferry for about a month because they were looking to beef up patrols. And they put me there with a Chinese kid who spoke zero English and was scared of his own shadow. And I was like, listen, I got no problem working with this kid, but I got a problem that he has a gun. And I'm like, the problem I have is that someone could take his gun easily. So I'm on a half-hour ferry ride going over. There's maniacs all over. If I have to get arrested, he's not helping me. And if anything, he's impeding my safety because he has a gun and I could take it off of him anytime I want. And so can anybody else. I'm like, I have no problem working. You want to put him on? Just why does he have to have a gun? I don't understand why he has a gun. And it's sad, but that's the state. Now that one kid who was kind of an outlier, Now he's kind of the majority. And by the way, I think he's a fucking supervisor right now. I think he's pretty high up the ranks.
Well, Juju also, Juju grew up in New York City, but Juju had an accidental discharge and took someone's life. So these things do happen. It's unfortunate, but I think accidental discharge is stupidity. But you're right. Listen, we should have New York City kids working in the New York City Police Department. I always felt that my experience in housing growing up really helped me because I worked in housing the majority of my career. I did not grow up in housing, but I was a big time ball player growing up, and I played basketball for the housing authority, and I went all throughout the entire city. I played ball in Bed-Stuy, I played ball in East New York, I played ball all over Brooklyn for housing authorities. So I really had a good eye-opening experience to housing. And I was the only white kid on the team. So, I understood diversity.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. It's nuts. Rob Nappy says one of the best sergeants that ever worked for me was a floor manager at Macy's. She was great at dealing with workers and people, job life experience. Exactly. Like college prepares you to go out into the world, but nothing replaces being out there in the real world. Absolutely nothing, So I know we went completely off what we were going to talk about, but let's wrap it up. But yeah, 100%. I'm not, and you know what? And it's actually a great segue into what the hell we were going to talk about, which is that 1,975 cops have been assaulted in 2024. That's a 41% increase from 2023, steadily been rising. And college isn't preparing you for that either. Life experience is going to prepare you for that. So there's multiple factors going on why these assault against cops are up. The one that the police department hones in on, which is that, it's because cops are doing police work, it's absolutely disgusting. It's disgusting. It's the biggest gaslighting, and it shows anyone that's ever regurgitated that statement should be immediately removed from the police department, because if you look historically, that was not the truth, that cops are assaulted because they're doing police work. Because during the broken windows theory of policing, cops were not getting assaulted at this rate. Eric, what do you think stands out to you about this 2024, 1,975 cops assaulted?
Well, before I get into that, I just want to give a shout out to Lance Libestein, who made a comment here. Says, "Yo, Eric, Semper Fi, brother, I'm up early watching." Lance Libestein, actually, we went to boot camp together almost 25 years ago. In January of 2000, we went to boot camp together. So that's the brotherhood of the Marine Corps, man. We still stay in touch, and we get together every year. We have a reunion. We celebrate the Marine Corps birthday and Veterans Day. So that's what we need to do. Lance, thanks, brother. Actually, if you get a chance, I'll see if I can get you information. Check out Lance Libestein. He actually plays poker for a living, and he does really well. So, shout out, brother. Anyway, listen, let's talk about the phenomenon of police officers getting attacked. I saw the article, and of course, Michael Petrie, who's actually one of the most high-regarded chiefs of the police department, has been extremely silent with this administration, but he's very intelligent. But I'm in complete opposition of his statement, or maybe his statement was taken out of context, what he quoted in the article. And in the article, he said that the contributing factor is that the police officers are more engaged now than ever. So there is an argument. I'm sure the police officers are extremely engaged right now because crime is on the rise. They do what they're paid and trained to do. So they're out there having more engagements. But I don't think that's why they're being assaulted. I think assaults are on the rise because police officers are under attack right now. They're extremely vulnerable because of the 50A, the legislation. There's no support from the police department. It's a diminished police department. And we're also hiring police officers that honestly have no business doing the job for the New York City Police Department.
Eric, I just Juju says New York City officers should only live in the boroughs except Staten Island. We were talking about this the other day. If you knew you were going to get into a physical altercation, if you knew where would more than likely you would want to pick your team of guys from?
As the stupidest comment I've ever heard. First of all, I grew up mostly in Brooklyn, Staten Island. I did live in the Bronx for almost a decade. I lived in Queens. The only borough was Manhattan. And I can tell you right now, I'll say right now, the toughest kids growing up, they were from Staten Island. John, you and I spoke about this. I'll tell you right now, I'll take a team of kids from Staten Island. And I'm not saying the other boroughs aren't tough, but the toughest kids I dealt with kids from Staten Island. Maybe they had something to prove because it's always the forgotten borough, but they were pretty tough. So I would pick my team from Staten Island. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just think there were a lot of fights happening on Staten Island, like in the 90s and in the 80s. I just think there were a lot of physical altercations. So there was a lot of people that traditionally lifted weights, fought, were involved in martial arts, boxing, things of that nature. So and Staten Island 100% is the borough. You're out of your mind. I mean, there's housing projects, there's anything you could think of is in Staten Island. And again, most of the kids from Staten Island grew up in Brooklyn. And then the other problem you have is you know, when we were in the academy, we did boxing, right? And I remember there were 2 drills I remember, and the only time we ever did it, and it was boxing, and then there was another one where you would get on your knees, and 2 guys would try to handcuff you, and they were on their knees also too, right? And I remember like watching everybody and going, "Wow, this is the first time these people are in physical altercations." People were scared to death. Like this is the first time. And now I heard that they completely did away with both of those drills. Right? They completely did away with it. They completely did away with boxing, and they completely did away with you going on your knees and someone trying to cuff you, and then vice versa. You two would get on your knees and then try to cuff somebody. And I remember thinking that I was like, wow, most of these people have never been in a physical altercation. This is wild, because you know, like I said, I've been in a lot of different confrontations in my life, and I was like, wow, could I really be a cop? And I kept thinking that, and then I kept thinking, and I was looking at all the people that I spoke to in my neighborhood and around that I knew that were cops or had became cops or were becoming cops, and I'm like, well, if that kid's a cop, how can I be a cop? Like, you know what I mean? It's crazy, you know? So, yeah, I think a big problem is relating to these assaults. One is we've lost a lot of masculinity out there amongst men in our communities in New York City, and amongst men who become New York City police officers. We're not seeing the rough and tumble athletes. We're not seeing the rough and tumble kids become cops anymore. They're not seeing it as a viable profession. So you're getting people that are entering this profession blind, that did not ask themselves the same question. Could I really be a cop? Could I really fight with people? Am I really willing to get into a possible, potentially deadly situation if need be? A lot of people are just like, it's a great job, and I retire in 25 years, and everything's good, you know?
Rich ROJ or Rich Raj, you can say, he said $20 to the podcast. Good morning, guys. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for donating to the podcast. If I'm right, John, doesn't one portion of Juju live on Staten Island? If I'm correct, I think that one portion of Juju actually lives on Staten Island.
I don't know, but I just know all of their stories. I think my mic went out. Sorry.
That's all right. It must have been Juju.
Well, your stalling's been doing good, so I mean, it's good. It's been much better since I said something. So.
Yeah, you know what? It must be because I'm actually close to Coachella right now, where they had the Trump rally. So we had some wind up here, and I don't know, maybe the Trump rally hurt the stallings. But anyway, you know, listen. First of all, and I think the kids on Staten Island were tough also because there were guns and there were knives, of course, you know, and I grew up in Stapleton. So, but mostly, I don't think you had to worry about guns as much as the other boroughs. Like, you knew, like, if you had some issues, it was going to be an actual fist fight. You know, it was pretty raw. So, yeah, I think that's a real ignorant comment.
Yeah, no. So, but but the whole thing's a joke. But I love all the backstories of the upper echelon. It's like, yeah, I grew up in the hood. It's like, no, you didn't. Stop. Would you live there when you were 5? Like, you didn't grow up in the hood. You're a geek. You're still a geek. Everybody could tell you're a geek. Like, stop with the nonsense, the made up stories. Like, yeah, I grew up, and then they're walking around on the streets with the news media, like people even know who they are. It's like people are just trying to get on the news. You don't know that dude. He doesn't know you. Stop. You know, and you know, so that's the funniest thing. I love when I see the upper echelon with their New York City stories. It's like, dude, you were playing video games. Everyone knows what you were doing. You were getting beat up in school. Like, don't lie. Stories are out there, guy. But yeah, so that's one problem. Is like, right? That's. I think when we look at that, it's like, who's becoming cops today, and then you're removing a lot of masculinity out of the NYPD, which leaves people where they feel that they can assault cops. You know, they leaves people where they feel that they can assault cops. Like, that people have when you step out of the vehicle, that's your first form of your looks, your appearance, whether you're stepping out of the vehicle, whether you're on a foot post, that's your first form of force, right? So if somebody looks at me and says, I'm going to smack this guy in the face and I'm going to get away with it, and he can't do anything to me physically and hurt me, then you already lost that presence. That's your first form of defense, of actual force of defense is eliminated when we put somebody like Juju in there, who's just like, "Ooh, well, I'm tall at least and fat." You know, I think that's the main issue, right? That's the first problem is right there. We lost the presence. We lost our presence. We lost the presence of masculinity in the New York City Police Department. Would you agree, or do you still see a presence?
1,000%. It's been emasculated police department. Not to give Juju too much airtime, but I can say this because I worked in the 120 police in Staten Island. I worked in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I worked in the Bronx. So I had an opportunity to work a vast majority spread throughout the entire city. So I worked with Staten Island. Most of the cops that worked in the 120 precinct were Staten Island and Brooklyn homegrown. When I worked in the Bronx, they come from all over the place. They come from Westchester. They come from upstate. Some come from the Bronx. There's a good mix. And of course, when I got there, it was a reputation. All the cops in the Bronx were the best. And that was absolutely not the truth. There was a lot of great cops there, but there was also a lot of great cops in the 112 precinct. And I would argue what Juju's saying, because most of the cops in the 112 precinct, they're New York City homegrown. Far more percentage in the 112 precinct are Staten Island and Brooklyn homegrown than actually the cops I worked with in the Bronx, because the majority of those cops in the Bronx actually grew up upstate. Their first indoctrination of New York City was commencing, in their experience in the police department. So a huge dichotomy there. And I think that Juju is speaking from total ignorance or just trying to troll this podcast as always. But yeah, this department.
I don't even want to hear this guy's name. Just ignore him. He's a loser.
But it's completely emasculated. Absolutely, the police department is emasculated. There was a time when we had so much support that there were police officers that, they were not tough people. I guess you could say they didn't have that tough persona, but they weren't exposed, and they were able to I guess you could say, hide within the police department or get unnoticed. But now, because there's no support, everyone is being exposed. And if you don't have those capabilities, you're being exposed right now, because there's no support. They don't have that aura or that appearance that the police department is being supported. So we lost that. There were cops that were not so tough, and they were able to address a crowd because of the support that we had. But now there's no support, and you actually have to be able to handle yourself.
Yeah, but I think I get the support thing, but there's still, before we even get to the support, it's still you as a police officer. I remember I used to get a foot post on 418 Jersey Street. I used to get it by myself. And then I would always get replaced by two cops, right? So I had the post by myself because, again, the sergeant was a loser. So he thought I cared that I was there by myself, and I didn't, because I knew most of those kids. I went to high school with a lot of those kids. So I didn't care at all. Like, it wasn't a thing for me. I didn't care. And I'll never forget it. I'm getting replaced by two kids, and I see them walking down the block. And as they're walking down the block on Jersey Street, they're getting abused by the kids on Jersey Street. And they're walking with their head down. They put the hat on, they're walking, and they're like, yeah, just calling them names, all this stuff. And I'm like, right there, those two guys are likely to be victims of assault. They're cops. They're supposed to be there to protect people and stop things, but they themselves are victims. They themselves are easily victims. So how are we putting victims out there to protect other people? And I'll never forget it. I was like, I seen it. I walked right up. And I'm like, what's going on? What's the problem? And the cops are like saying to me, oh, no. Everything's good. I was like, no. I was like, what'd you say? What's the matter? What's going on? What's the problem? And now the guys on the block that were just abusing them are like, oh, no, nothing. It's all good. I was like, sure. Yeah, we're good. Okay. And I remember, and I didn't have any more time on the job than these guys. They had the same amount of time on the job. And I was like, dude, you can't let these guys fucking, You can't let these guys abuse you. Like, you got to handle your situation. Like, there's two of you, there's one of me. Why are they abusing you two and they're not abusing me? Why? Because if they start to do it, I'm going to call people here and I'm going to lock them up. I'm not going to play nice with these people. Like, this is, you don't get abused. You know, there are numerous violations that you could find there. I'm like, you're making it harder for me. I'm like, I'm standing here by myself and I got to be here by myself. I can't let them think that I'm weak. You guys, there's two of you. You look weak. You're going to get abused all night. And then when we used to flip flop, one time you do the day, one time you do the night. And I'll never forget that. And I'm like, these guys are victims. And later on, that same day, those two guys became victims. Those two guys became victims later on that same day. And I think you probably remember the story. So I'll tell you the story. So there's two cops on a foot post, same guys that replaced me. So after I kind of got into it with them, because I wasn't really fond of the cops, and I'm still not. Keeps messing up. I keep messing the mic up. But yeah, sorry. So, but I'm still not too fond of them. And but they approach a group. They approach one guy. They don't approach a group. They group one of the guys that was talking smack to them early and start to, I don't know what they were doing. They start to like interact with him. I don't know if they were going to take enforcement action. I don't even know what led up to the encounter, but both of them approach the guy. The guy grabs one of the cops by the shirt, rips the shirt off of him, takes his badge. The other cop says that he took his ass out and was swinging it at the guy who was throwing the cop around and winded up ripping his shirt off. And he went upstairs with the cop shield, went up into his house, locked the door. The two cops were outside, and he threw the shield out the window. Remember that story?
I'm not going to name the names. I know exactly the story you're talking about. And they actually made it pretty far in their careers.
I think they're still doing well. You know, they still made it further than me. So they throw the shield out the window. So apparently the story comes out, and this story doesn't come out from them. It comes out from somebody else. I don't know who. I don't know if someone on the block called an 85 for them, I believe. Somebody on the street saw what was happening and called 911. They went back, and now there's a warrant out for this guy. Right? So now there's a warrant out. So about a week later, I see the kid. I'm walking into work, and I see the kid in the 120 in the vestibule, and he's there with his father, and he's there with his lawyer. Now I don't know what he's there, and I was like, "What's going on? What are you here for?" Right? I'm walking into work. I'm not changed. I'm nothing. I'm dressed the way I'm dressed. He's like, "Oh, I got to turn myself in." I'm like, "Who are you supposed to turn yourself into?" He says, "Oh, I'm supposed to turn myself into," and he names the two cops' names. So now I'm like, "Oh," and I remembered hearing the story. I was like, "All right, stay here. I'll get him for you." So I let the desk know. And the desk goes, "Do me a favor. They're downstairs. Just tell them to go. They're downstairs getting changed. Do me a favor. Just tell them to come up here as soon as they're done, and they're gonna take him into custody." So I'm like, okay. So I go down to the locker room, getting changed. They're down there, and I was like, "Yeah, listen, that dude that you guys had a problem with, he's upstairs in the vestibule. He's here to turn himself in." Sergeant says, "Go up there. Take the arrest." They're like, "Oh, okay." And they run out the back door and they go right out the post and they don't collar him. And the dude leaves. And next thing I know, I'm getting questioned on why I didn't take him into custody. And I'm like, wait, I wasn't even at work. I was off duty. I was just walking into work. I didn't know that they didn't take him into custody. The guy waited there for 2 hours and they ran away to where the squad, now he had to turn himself into the squad and not them. And like that's the first problem in policing, is you have people in policing that have no business being there. And so the reason I'm telling that story is that's when you actually would be in a lot of trouble for assaulting a cop, right? And that kid actually got arrested and he faced the consequences for it down the road. But it would have never even happened if you would have had the right people on the post that day. He would have assaulted the cop. None of it would have even happened. So that's my first issue that I see, is that
You had hit your mic. It's all right. And
Yeah, what's going on?
R-Bad, 999 to the podcast. Thank you so much. How many incidents has Juju number 2 accidentally discharged? I grew up in Staten Island, worked in Staten Island and Brooklyn, retired, and live in Staten Island. By the way, Juju, it's a negligent discharge. R-Bad, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. R-Bad has actually been helping me out with some technical issues, and hopefully get them all ironed out. But definitely had some weather issues today. So I got a question. And I I've trained my entire life. It's just been a passion of various martial arts, Krav Maga.
We lost Eric. I jinxed him when I said that Star Lake was doing good. You're back. What were you saying?
Did I cut out? I said I trained my whole life in various martial arts. Past couple of years, I've really been into jiu-jitsu, but I've trained Krav Maga, Kali, boxing, all types of martial arts. Really important, it's a passion for mine. But I'm going to say this. Does size matter? Ladies, I'm not talking about I'm just kidding, but does size matter? And when it comes to policing, I think the answer is yes and no. So especially in policing, I think size does matter. And not necessarily height, but I think you should have a certain appearance. It does, even if someone has never trained any martial arts and they're physically strong, even if they can't fight, their appearance enough would be a deterrent. So my question is, do you think size matters? I'm curious what you say, and then I'll give my response on that.
Absolutely not. It doesn't matter unless you're 105 pounds soaking wet and you don't train and you don't look like you're ready, because you could be small. The toughest guys I know are small. The toughest guys I know are littler than me. They're shorter than me, and they're tough. And I always said, and then I would know a lot of big dudes that were complete cowards. 6'4", 6'5", played D1 football, and they'll get punked out by a kid that's 5'3", 110 pounds that they could smack them with their pinky, And I would always say, like, big guys never get tested. Big guys never have to get tested. So a lot of them are soft. It's not true for everybody, but a lot of times the bully in your school, the big guy, he's not that tough. The minute you get a dude that calls him out, he's like, oh no, I'm good. I don't want to fight, and like, so I'm going to say size doesn't matter as much as your presence, and your presence has a lot to do with your physical capabilities and your mental, like how aggressive you are, like how aggressive as a person, how willing you're allowed. Like, are you willing to fight? Yes or no? If you're not willing to fight, you shouldn't be a cop. End the story. If somebody could come up to you and smack you in your face and you're not going to do anything, guess what? You should not be a New York City police officer. And that's my biggest thing. I don't care what size you are. If you're 5 feet tall and you're 120 pounds and someone comes up and smacks you in the face and you start uppercutting them, you should be a cop.
So I'll say this. So in regular self-defense situation scenarios, size does matter to a point. And what that means is it's so important that we all train. Everyone should train and be prepared. God forbid the worst case scenario. I don't encourage people to go out there and fight. You should always try to walk away. That's a win. But size does matter in self-defense situations because it makes it harder. So even if you have more training than someone else, but they're much larger, it doesn't mean you can't overcome that adversary, but it's going to be more difficult than if someone else is smaller. That's why there's weight classes when it comes to MMA and boxing, because it does make a difference. The trained person most likely will overcome the untrained person, but it's going to be more difficult because size does play a factor. But when it comes to policing, I do not think size is important. Just the appearance may help when it comes to size, but it's a different type of fighting in the police, unless you're caught somewhere by yourself. But usually you're working in teams. At least you should be in shape, and all police officers should be training. They should be working out in the gym, getting their bodies, as in the best condition as possible, and also do some form of training, whether it's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, whatever they choose, even Tai Chi, something where they're training their body. I think both are important, and I don't think size is really that important when it comes to policing because you're working in teams. I believe at least you should, for the most part. Can there be situations where you're by yourself? Absolutely. And when you're by yourself, training is so important because I do believe size does matter. Even if you're you know, even if I I've been training. If I'm faced with someone who's 6'4", I think I can overcome that person, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a lot harder. I have a bigger person to deal with. So I'd say the answer is yes and no.
Overall, I don't care how big somebody is. Doesn't matter. I obviously, if you're in a brawl, you want bigger people with you, but I don't want somebody who's big and soft. I'll take somebody who's short and willing to fight any day over some dude that's just big and soft and big for nothing, And so I think ultimately size doesn't matter. I do think you need some mindset matters more. Mindset and present matters much more. So I think that's the first reason assaults are up. Is I think assaults are up on New York City police officers mainly because of the people we have that out there on the streets as New York City police officers. I say that, we often said it on this podcast, make the NYPD masculine again. And that's not a knock on women. It's just a fact. The NYPD has lost its masculine presence and masculine stance. Those two cops that I just described, or that one kid who I didn't want to work with, the other cop that I described, that is the majority of cops today on New York City streets, who are, by the way, college educated, who most of them never grew up, don't understand the streets in New York City, didn't grow up in New York City, and never probably been in a physical encounter in their life. So that is the majority. So that's first the problem. Right? People get assaulted. People are victims because you can be a victim. You give the presence that you can be a victim. You give the presence that it's okay to hit me. I'm not going to do anything to you. Right? That's the first thing. Right? Oh, if I hit this guy, he's not going to do anything to me. No one gets that presence on a lot of other, like back in the day, people didn't have that presence on the police force. It's like, oh, if I hit this guy, he's going to hit me back and he's going to hit me hard and he might hit me a lot more and I'm a lot harder than I could hit him. And so that deterred a lot of stuff. So we lost that deterrent. We lost the physical presence. We lost the physical standards. We lost the uniformity. There's 15,000 different uniforms in the NYPD. There's no standard. The training has been diminished. So you have that. Then we get into, well, people assault cops now is because they can assault cops, because even when you assault a cop, whatever the reason is that you assaulted that cop, because you thought he could do it or because you were trying to get away from him, is there's zero consequence for when I actually assault a cop.
Absolutely, there's zero consequence. I'm interested. It's funny, right? We have these numbers here about the amount of assaults that we have on cops, but what we don't have is the conviction rate. We don't know what happens, the dichotomy between the actual charges of assault on police officers and what actually happens in court with these cases. I would predict that most of these cases are not actually leading up to convictions. And if they are, I would highly doubt their indictments for felony assaults, that they're probably reduced to misdemeanor assaults. I would put my last dollar on that. I mean, what do we know when it comes to New York City? If you're Donald Trump, you're convicted of a felony, but most adversaries and violent perpetrators in New York City are not getting indicted for felony assaults when it comes to attack on police officers. Absolutely not, especially the climate that we're in. So I like what you said. I think it's important what John said is when we talk about police officers having masculine traits, we're not saying that it's a patriarchal society where it has to be men, because I think that men and women need those masculine traits to be effective police officers. Women that are in business, if they're running a firm or they work in corporations, to be effective, they have to have masculine traits, right? They have to be authoritative. They have to be able to take charge. Or they have to be strong. Well, the same thing goes in police work. Men and women have to have strong traits. They have to be able to take charge. They have to have thick skin. Those are masculine traits. So it's necessary for men and women to be effective doing police work. Let's also talk about the other elephant in the room, optics. Optics, what also hurts police officers. Police officers, in many cases, not all, some are timid to take action because of oversight from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the legislation from the New York City Council, and the optics of public opinion, just as we see when it comes to the subway shooting involving two police officers in Brooklyn. Two police officers in Brooklyn are being ridiculed by the public, and the correlations that these police officers shot an armed adversary with a knife for $2.90 on the subway, which is a complete lie. and it's caused to create a perverse reaction from the public. So police officers are also fighting optics.
Yeah, so I think that in my opinion, those are the two major reasons. One, it's the presence of the police officers today. They don't have a masculine presence. They give the presence that they can be assaulted. They move, they walk, they talk like that they can be easily be victims, and that leads to more assaults. Now, is that everyone? No. But I'm saying it's the majority. It's the majority of kids coming out of the academy. When you look at these fights that take place, there doesn't seem to be uniformity in the way they stand, in the way they talk people, in the way they interview people, in the way that they move when they're fighting. So you see a lot of that happening. You see when there's an argument taking place or someone's raising the voice with cops, cops aren't taking control of that situation, what's leading people to become crazier and attack them. And I think that has a lot to do with the presence and the training. And then I say the second reason is because of, well, they're also empowered by the justice system. The justice system, I'm going to say when you look at these 1975 cops that have been assaulted, you'll probably see minimal people that are actually in jail for that currently. So we don't hold that account. We don't hold the people who actually assault cops accountable. And we don't hold people that assault civilians accountable. So why would we hold those that assault cops accountable? So we're seeing that, the breakdown of the justice system, and that has a large issue on it. But but if I had to put my money on what it was, I'm going to say right off the bat, if you don't feel like you could win a fight, or if you feel like you're going to have a problem in a fight, you're never going to assault that cop in the first place. And I've had encounter after encounter where I arrested people, and it's documented, so you guys could look this up, where I've locked up a lot of people that had numerous resisting arrest on their record. And yet when I arrested them, they did not resist arrest. They did not. They were more than compliant, even though every single arrest they had, they arrested. And it wasn't because I'm the biggest and toughest guy. No, it was because the person that I was with and who I was with, the way we moved, the way we interviewed, the way we talked, the way we took control of the situation, the person knew they would have a problem. And that's why. And so that alleviates that right there. And so I think those two things are my biggest, are the reasons why you're seeing this. And anything else you think that we should that you think is leading up to this?
Absolutely, lack of training. So I always found that with the police department, especially now, I mean, clearly we could see that the training is inadequate. I saw the way those two police officers on the subway in Brooklyn were maneuvering. And what did I say? I've been very critical of it. I feel sorry for them. I think they did their job as best as they could, but I feel sorry for them. It's a complete lack of training. And honestly, the way they maneuvered, it looked like they didn't spend one day in the police academy. So unfortunately, what we see is that there's two sides of the spectrum. We see police officers are being trained for someone who's completely compliant. Someone's compliant. You tell them to put their hands behind their back. You put them under arrest. Then we have the opposite side of the spectrum. When you're faced with someone who has a firearm and you have to pull out your firearm and shoot. But what's missing a lot of times is that middle ground, just actual tussles. Can police officers handle themselves and prepare themselves for physical tussles? Now, if they don't, I've been saying this for the longest time, we're going to lose a police officer. A police officer is going to die or get killed by the hands of another without a firearm or a gun because police officers are not properly trained. We have lower standards. They're timid because of oversight, because of Civilian Complaint Review Board. They're timid because of potential civil liability. And they're timid to be arrested and convicted themselves, just like Juan Perez was. So they got all these contributing factors. But there is a lack of training for that middle ground. We fire and qualify twice a year with your firearm. And there's most likely the chances are you will not use your firearm and you will be involved in tussles. And just every day-to-day working in New York City, in a metropolis, you have to know how to move people. There's an art of moving people without even touching them. Or sometimes just constantly you have to put your hands on people and it's not even a tussle. So we need to train for that middle ground of actual physical tussles or just touching people. And how do we do that? We're missing the mark here. You need to train. Get involved in jiu-jitsu. Get involved in wrestling. Get involved in Muay Thai. Get yourself constantly pressure tested so that you're comfortable. When you're in these situations, God forbid you get into a fight working in uniform, it should be easy compared to your training. You should be sweating. You should sweat in training so hard so that you don't have to bleed and get hurt while you're on the job.
Yeah, but again, I think the training goes hand in hand with the presence, because if you were trained properly, you would stand properly, you would act accordingly, you would talk properly. So I think that, I think it's definitely coupled with that. Like training to presence, part of the presence you have as a New York City police officer, or should have, or had, was based upon the training, right? The interview stance, things that you learn, like when you're a cop, your uniform, how to take care of your uniform, how your uniform should look. And Sacrifice Pain 66, he said, "I seen officers in New York City when there's something happening or turnstiles or fights, some officers look the other way. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm not trying to bash the officers, but some of them, I think they just don't want to get involved because they just don't want to lose their career or their pension." Well, I also see when cops are involved and it's too late and they don't want to be involved as well. And honestly, it's just, you shouldn't be out there. You shouldn't be a cop. I mean, these are the standards. That's why I say New York City, being a New York City police officer is no longer a viable profession, because it isn't. So if you're either going to go out there and put your life and your safety first, or you're not. To me, it's an excuse. It's like saying, "Oh, you know why I let the kid rob me in school? You know why I let the bully beat me up in school? Because I don't want to get suspended. I don't want to get suspended." Guess what's going to happen? You're going to get robbed. You're going to get beat up a lot in school because you're worried about getting suspended. You're worried about, "Oh, they're going to kick me out of the school." I'm like, I don't know. I'd rather not get beat up in the bathroom, potentially get my head smashed through something and die and bleed out. I'd rather get suspended out of school. And the same should be true when you're a New York City cop. You should say, "You know what? Well, at the end of the day, I need to go home to my family. At the end of the day, I was doing my job. I did nothing wrong." So, and if you're going that and you're performing your career righteously, all of those things, should they be of concern to you? Yeah, they should. Which is why you should vote appropriately, which is why you should understand politics, which is why you should understand what's happening in the city you work in, the city you serve, right? That's why all of these things are necessary. People are like, "Why do you care about politics?" Because it affects absolutely everything. Cops should know politics more than anybody else in New York City. So to me, it's an excuse. If is it real? Yeah, it's absolutely real. But if you're going to put that at the forefront of you going out and doing your job, don't do your job. We don't need you. We don't need to pay you money to put a uniform on to drive around and waste gas, or stand around with a uniform on and listen to the radio and not help anybody. Leave. We don't need cops then. That's the biggest case for abolish the police I've ever heard. "Oh, well, they're going to get in trouble, so they don't want to do their job." Okay.
So Sleepy Joe makes a great comment here. He said, "That is true, Eric. Question is, when can most cops even train nowadays with all the OT?" You're absolutely right? So cops are under the gun. They're working constantly, day in and day out. So if I was police commissioner, or if I had any authority when it comes to the police department, for one, I would work on changing the training when it comes to the academy. So I know there's certain certifications that have to be filled. First thing I would do is I would remove the baton in training. The only time I would use the baton is for disorderly or crowds where you have to form a formation. But actual everyday carrying the baton, I don't even think is necessary. What you need is actual proper training, because actually using that baton just causes brute force. It causes more injury and aggravation to an actual adversary, but it doesn't allow you to put that person in custody and control them. So I think it would be necessary to actually incorporate jiu-jitsu, wrestling, some catch wrestling, so some type of form of grappling. It doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. It could be sambo. I think grappling should be implemented. It should be extremely important, or fighting when it comes to Krav Maga, some form of grappling where you get used to controlling another person. Because if you have control over another person, it's the most difficult thing. You don't have to cause brute force. You don't even have to hurt your knuckles and get hurt. I also think that one day of your week, I know it's extremely tough to do, but one day out of the week, every police officer should have to spend their day training. Now, someone would say, "How can we do that?" And I think that if every police officer spends one day of the week training, spend the entire day, then we would actually have less cops out there, but we would be more effective. Sometimes we see these pile-ons with cops, and it's not really effective. So if we have less cops, but they're trained, it would be more effective. And some people would say, well, what about cops getting hurt from training? Well, you could always get hurt, but training should be done lightly. You should be sparring and wrestling light, not to the point where it's a death match. If you're doing that and you're going to get hurt, that's actually not effective. It should be playful. That's how you learn. And I'm sure at the same time, plenty of police officers would appreciate that. We would have less police officers going sick. We would have more police officers out there that are trained and have the confidence to handle themselves, because confidence breeds confidence. If you have some tools and things to go back to and you're constantly doing it, you don't need to know 1,000 moves. A couple of moves that you constantly practice and constantly, those are your go-tos. Bruce Lee said it, not afraid of a man that knows 10,000 kicks. I'm afraid of a man that does one kick and practice it 10,000 times. So we don't have to have this array. You don't need to be a martial artist. Just a couple of go-to moves that you could constantly train over and over till it becomes part of your neural pathways.
Yep. So, all right, let's get into the article a little bit. So, assaults on NYPD cops have skyrocketed to unprecedented levels, surging 41% so far this year, and compared to last, and 60% according since 2019. Data obtained by the Post show. So since 2019, assaults against cops are up 60%. Nothing to see here, people. Crime's down. Nothing to see here. You're safe. You're safe. They're just targeting the cops for writing them summonses. That's the motto of the NYPD. It's because we're out there doing work. People are assaulting us. It's like I don't think that makes any sense. But okay. So the number of attacks on cops have risen for 5 straight years, and that dwarfs the number of assaults recorded in pre-pandemic 2019, when 1,253 were logged. Cops believe the shocking trend reflects a growing disrespect for cops and a building sentiment among criminals that fighting a cop will go unpunished. Years ago, you had to be really crazy to fight cops, said a longtime officer. Now it's open season for everyone. The protesters, the migrants, even the regular career criminals. Criminals know they won't face any consequences for hitting a cop, said the veteran, who asked to remain anonymous because he wasn't clear to speak to the media. Everyone knows they can attack cops and violently resist and get out the same day, the cop said. And if they don't get out, some activist group will show up and pay their bail. The whole city is upside down. Let's see what Three Hairs Hendricks has to say. PBA President Patrick Hendry echoed the observation. They think they could swing at a cop and get away with it because they believe the justice system is on their side. We started seeing a change when we turn out for these court cases, these cases in court. But in the consequences for attacking police officers need to come much faster so that the message trickles down to the street. Before we go any further, I'm just so sick of hearing about packing the courtroom. Like, dude, what are you doing? No one cares that you're in the courtroom, bro. You're there to support the cops when they're either in trouble or they need help. It's for support. If that's the only thing you're doing, step down, give up the election that you rigged already, and have someone who actually cares take your place.
Spot on, brother. Spot on. Absolutely. You're packing the court for emotional support for the police officer. Anything other than that, if that's your game plan, that's completely useless. The judge, the courtroom, they don't care. If anything, they actually laugh at you and look at all these police officers trying to back this police officer that was jammed up or was convicted for an assault or a charge with it. They're just laughing at you. You're there for emotional support, but that should not be your game plan. Absolutely not. I've said this before. So you have to face oversight from the Civilian Complaint Review Board. You have New York City Council. You have all this legislation. You have all these politicians, these Democratic socialists attacking the police department, funding them, trying to create more legislation that tears down at the law enforcement career, the foundation of it. They're trying to remove intrusive police work. We see the protest settlement. We see How Many Stops Act. We see all these proposals that have gotten through that have really created extreme layers for the police department, handicapped them from doing their job. We have optics. We have civil liability. So the only thing we can depend on right now is the leadership of the NYPD. We need the leadership to say, no matter what, City Council, CCRB, civil liability, we are going to support our police officers so that they're effective and they can do their job. If they face civil liability, we will fight these court cases. If the PBA needs help supporting their members, we will help support them. We will fight CCRB. We will have these frivolous CCRBs dismissed. We will be at New York City Council. You know, I was just present for the virtual monthly meeting at CCRB, which John and I were doing on a monthly basis for a while. We kind of stopped for a couple of months, but I just attended another virtual meeting at CCRB, and we never have someone present from the NYPD there as a liaison to listen to the complaints of the people and the concerns and to actually challenge the CCRB board. They're never there. The only ones that are there is John and myself in retirement. So again, if I was police commissioner or John was police commissioner, if we had authority, I can tell you this. I would implement that there has to be a member of the NYPD with good communication skills, with a strong ethic, with their boots on the ground, that have experienced police work, to be present at these virtual monthly meetings to counteract CCRB with their most ridiculous disdain and bias that they have for the police department. You should hear the public there. It's just complete bias for the police department, the public, and the CCRB panel, and there's no representation from the NYPD. None. So that's no support for the cops.
Yeah, no, they're never there. They could give two shits. So there's 879 people in the chat. If you guys could just do us a favor, like, subscribe, click the bell. If you're on social media, if you could like and share the post, we appreciate it. So let's go further into this article. We're talking about assaults on NYPD cops. They're up actually 60% since 2019, 41% since last year. A total of 1,975 assaults on police officers so far this year. But don't worry, people. Crime's down. Crime's down. So let's see. Oh, here it goes. Here it goes. Here it comes. I didn't even read this article, but we already talked about what it was going to be, and here it comes. We're starting to see it here. This is the gaslighting from the NYPD. They should be ashamed of themselves. Should absolutely resign their spots. So here we go. We're starting to see a change when we turn out for these court cases. That was Hendry. You're not seeing a change turning out for these court cases. So that's it. You know, either go to Turkey and get some hair plugs in your head, or shave your head. You look horrible. Your speech is awful. Come on this podcast and be a man for once. So NYPD Chief of Crime Control Strategies, one of the bigger disappointments in the NYPD, Michael LePetri, said this week, attacks on cops are pushing up the number of overall assaults in the city. We've seen a 5% increase with 22,806 so far this year compared to 21,712 at this point in 2023, the data, police data show. Police officers in New York City are more engaged than they ever been, LePetri said, noting crime against cops was at unprecedented levels. They're engaging with individuals that, quite frankly, should not be walking around the streets of New York. They're dangerous and they're assaulting police officers. In one caught-on-camera assault, police officer Mary Faye was left with blood running down her face after she tried to break up a fight on August 1st between a brute and a group of kids in the Bronx. After allegedly hitting her, Ernest Delma, 41, was tackled by the other cops at the corner of Roosevelt and Rosedale in Classen Point. A longtime Bronx cop called for mandatory minimum sentencing for assaulting a cop. I think everyone that assaults a police officer should do a minimum 1 year in jail, the cop said. I've always said that we are the last line of defense, the officer said. If I wasn't a cop, I would feel the same way. Like your parents have taught you, never be disrespectful of cops. These people just don't care. Eric, what do you got to say about Mike LePetri and that the cops are more engaged than they've ever been?
Early in the episode, I spoke on this, but I'm glad you wrote it because I want to speak on it again for anyone that showed up late, friends and listed a podcast. Michael LePetri completely missed the mark here. It's complete gaslighting. He's, again, Michael LePetri is actually one of the, we hold him in high regard as one of the more intelligent chiefs that we've seen in the police department. I was at ComStat numerous times where he was actually on the dais, and I was quite impressed of how intelligent he is. But this is just pure gaslighting, and he's not standing true in this administration. He's completely just trying to hold on by a cliff so that he stays in this administration, stays relevant. That is absolutely a ridiculous statement here. Yes, the cops are more engaged right now because crime is up. So which one is it? They want to gaslight the public and say crime is down. Crime is significantly up. So the cops are doing their job as they're paid and trained to do. They're not being assaulted because they're engaged in the public now. They've engaged the public probably at the same rate during the 90s at the height of crime. especially with the Rudy Giuliani era, the height of broken windows, the height of intrusive police work. So this is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that their intrusive police work is any more than it was in the 90s. But what do they have in the 90s? They had support. So this is a complete lie. There's no support from you, Michael LePetri, and your fellow chiefs in the police department. You're not there supporting your police officers. You're not saying that, hey, we're going to protect them at all costs and provide them protection for civil liability. You're not saying that we're going to protect them at all costs and have these ridiculous, frivolous CCRBs dismissed, as they should in most cases, especially when they're dealing with a violent perpetrator. You should be fighting the CCRB. The fact, I testified to the CCRB on this monthly meeting. CCRB has the ability to self-initiate a complaint. How could that not be bias? How could, if the CCRB identifies something as something that should be a complaint, that's bias in it already. They're already supporting the complainant. So how can that actually be a non-biased investigation? Where is the police department to combat that? This is a complete lie. Yes, they're more engaged right now than they were several years ago because crime is on the rise, but they're being attacked. It's a phenomenon because there's no support. And also with this 50A, it makes them extremely vulnerable, and police officers are terrified. And we also have police officers that should not be doing police work, that they just do not have the nomenclature. They just do not have the ability to be police officers. They lack the masculinity to be a police officer for the NYPD.
Yeah, and I'm gonna push back a little bit. I don't think that the police officers are more engaged than they were. I just don't. I think you have a small group of cops that are more engaged, but I think overall engagement's far down. I think it's far down. The numbers that they're talking about, I heard him testify recently. No, he didn't testify. He was at a conference. He was at a press conference, and he was like kind of dispelling what we were saying about how that they're not targeting the right people. And he was saying, we're giving summonses to the right people. So if you're giving summonses to the right people, why are none of them being frisked? If you're giving summonses to the right people, why are only 10% of those people being frisked? Doesn't make sense. If you're giving summonses to the right people, that wouldn't be the case. It would be 90% of those people were getting frisked. Actually, it would be 99% of those people were getting frisked. Part of my French. That's what it would be. If you were summoning the right people, if you were stopping the right people, if you were charging people appropriately, because that's another problem that the New York City Police Department still hasn't came to find out, that if you actually charge people appropriately for the crime they committed, you're holding the district attorney's feet to the fire to have to now work to not charge this person, but instead we give them a big out, because instead of charging people with felonies, we hit them with misdemeanors. Instead of charging people when they actually assault a police officer, we say, oh no, the cop's really not that seriously injured. We don't want to take a felony because it looks bad, because we want to show that crime's down, when in fact nobody believes that crime's down, and crime isn't down. Crime's up over 30% in New York City since Eric Adams took office. So, I mean, that is just absolutely, it's a slap in the face to everybody. And I think the third reason that assaults against cops are up is because the upper echelon of the NYPD, the politically appointed management, have helped the leftists, both the elected leftists and the leftist groups that have tried to emasculate the NYPD. They have worked hand in hand with these groups to help, so while they at the same time they gaslight the public and gaslight their own cops. So I'm going to say number 3 falls on you guys.
You know what, John, in light of what you just said, sometimes we disagree on things, and we have a friendly perspective when it comes to it, but I'm actually going to stand corrected. I'm actually going to agree with you on this. Now, I would say because crime is up, that maybe there's more 911 calls and police officers are more engaged in 911 response. But actually, when it comes to intrusive police work, it's only the khaki pants, the majority that are doing it. You have your public safety teams and your neighborhood safety teams. I know they're out there doing it, but a majority of the job, you're right, especially based on Kemper's testimony, that approximately 97% of their encounters when someone's evading transit fare, they're not frisked and searched. So I stand corrected. You're right. It probably is not more engagement. So after thinking about it, you're right. I was thinking about the correlation with crime and what I was doing out there with the police work. But the crime is definitely up, which is why they have to have a presence in the subways. And they definitely, I would think they possibly might be responding to more 911 calls. I know they're, like I said, because crime is up. But I think that's a great point that you put up. So I'm going to agree with you. I stand corrected. I think you're right.
Because I just think it's really it's such a falsehood, and it's really wrong to tell the public this. And this is what they're doing. They're just like shifting the blame. They're shifting the blame. What the NYPD, the upper echelon of the NYPD, what Mike LePetri's saying here, and he's not the only one. They all say it. When they're sitting there and they're telling you, it's because cops are more engaged that assaults are up on cops. They're basically saying it's the cops' fault that they're being assaulted. That's what they're telling you. They're telling you, well, you guys want us to do the work, so we're doing the work and we're being assaulted. It's not what it is. It's not what it is. You know why cops are being assaulted? Because cops are letting themselves get assaulted. Because the criminal justice system's letting them get assaulted. Because the upper echelon of the NYPD is blaming them for them being assaulted. That's why the assaults are up on cops. You know, and then when you turn it to, well, how are we looking at assaults in New York City when it comes to crime and assaults? Assaults are up in New York City. And you know what the NYPD, the upper echelon of the NYPD tells you? Oh, yeah, but you know why assaults are up? Because assaults on cops are up. You're actually safe. You're actually safe. You know why assaults are up in New York City? Because assaults against cops are up. And you know why that is? Because we're out there doing the work that we've never done. It's like, really? So we're just going to erase the last 30 years of history and you're sitting there saying you're doing the work we never done? I don't think so. I'm not buying it. You got a bunch of rookie kids in khaki pants running around 30, 40 deep, and they're the ones that are responsible for most of what the activity that's happening in New York City now. They're responsible for it. And again, the way they move, they don't appear highly trained to me. They don't appear like they know what's going on here, and they're running around with people that have a lot of low integrity, and they were trained by people with low integrity, and that's why the community actually is getting fed up with that unit as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Listen, I think training is a huge factor. Lower standards, absolutely a huge factor. But what's also a factor is that we lost him, you know, again, because Michael Petrie is completely gaslighting the public, believe that, well, if the police department's doing more police work by doing intrusive police work, that they're going to be assaulted. That's absolutely not the case. The problem is we lost the mystique, the allure, and the aura of the police department. The NYPD was the GOAT of policing, iconic, and the NYPD was feared on the streets. And there is a correlation between fear and discipline. And there's absolutely no fear right now because the police officers are vulnerable because of the 50A. They're not getting support from the leadership of the police department. They're under attack by civil liability. They're under attack by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and the police department is not standing there. And the PBAs and all the other unions are completely useless in defense of the police officers, while simultaneously they're providing campaign funds for politicians that are complete polarizing to the police department and their members by endorsing and defund the police politicians, endorsing politicians that have a complete anti-police sentiment and anti-police rhetoric for police officers. So it's all these factors. It's a conglomerate of issues. We also have police officers that they're terrified to do the job because they're worried about their pension, they're worried about their career, they're worried about getting jammed up. And those things are real. But what is not real is when we see police officers actually get attacked and we see the police officers not fighting back and other police officers just stand there and not doing anything. Those are police officers that should have never been hired, because I can tell you right now, those things would be on our mind if we were still doing the job. We would be thinking about oversight, the Civilian Complaint Review Board. But as soon as someone becomes a legit threat, we will be ready for it. Just as those police officers on the subway, they were hamstrung. I'm sure there was completely, we could see a lack of training. I'm sure they were probably concerned about oversight. But once that adversary actually charged them with a knife, they did take out their firearms, start shooting. So the reality is there, if you're under threat for your life or threat of injury, despite all this oversight, you will take action. So we need the right cops to do this job. Again, LePetrie, Michael, you really missed the mark. Completely gaslighting. I think it's time for you to go. I think you're completely compromised. I think you know that the upper echelon is completely corrupt at this point. It's inadequate. It's inept. And you, as intelligent you are, it makes it even worse that you're a coward and you don't stand up and tell the truth. It's not, and I agree with you, John, because you and I spoke about this, and we talked about this on a prior episode where Michael Kemper himself actually blamed the police officers for the rise in assaults, and that was about a year ago. And here we are, and the assaults have risen even more, and we're blaming the cops. They're taking the responsibility, accountability, and liability for the increase in assaults. That's absolutely ridiculous. And the fault is on the leadership by not supporting these cops and getting them the training that's necessary. And the cops should be told straight out. That's why we need a tough police commissioner. We need a police commissioner that says, our cops will be trained to the best of their ability, and they have a right to defend themselves. And despite CCRB or any civil liability, we will back them up and protect them so that they can do their job. And that's what we're not hearing. And if they did that, the mystique, the aura, and the fear would be back. And yes, police officers need to be feared.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? And number 4, I'd like to blame the unions, because you brought up a great point, and I think that we didn't highlight it. This we just recently had Marco Capion, police officer. He's running for New York State Assembly. Senate District 23 in Staten Island and Brooklyn. And the PBA decided to endorse his opponent. They actually never even interviewed him. They pretended that they didn't even know he was running. And the person that they endorsed, who now seems to be a staunch supporter of police, like all Democrats are now, even though in 2020 they took a much different stance, especially here in New York and in New York City. So his opponent actually cheered on then Congressman Max Rose while he was at a defund the police rally that was put together by Black Lives Matter, while they were running around with a pig's head cut off. It wasn't a real pig's head cut off, but it was a pig's head cut off. And this was, she retweeted Max Rose saying she's so proud of her congressman for taking a stance. So basically a complete anti-police narrative. And we continue to see our unions, the police unions, particularly the police unions in the NYPD, not only fund these candidates, but they put their name and actually endorse it. And they're like, yeah, this person's we're endorsing this candidate because they're going to ensure public safety in New York City. Really? They're cheering on marches with a pig's head cut off, a defund the police movement. They actually went as far as, I think it was, they snuck Kathy Hochul the money, who was a big supporter of defund the police, but also they gave Justin Brannan money. And I remember, so I looked it up and I said, okay, maybe Justin, because some stuff that Justin does, I'm like, all right, not too bad. I kind of like that. You know, some stuff, not a lot, some stuff he doesn't appear far left on. But during the defund the police movement, he went far left. During the height of the mandates, he went far left. So I'm like, okay, let me be fair. Let me make sure that maybe this happened pre-2020. And then I look, and it's like, no. I start looking at the donations. It's like, no. We're sending donations to people that cheered on the defund the police movement. We gave them donations and endorsed people who cheered on the defund the police movement in 2020. And we did that before it. And then they did it again after it. So it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't like, you know what? I don't know. This guy went. We're not going to help him out anymore. He went completely against us. No. It was like, let's double down. Oh, they wanted to fund the police. This is the candidate for you people. This is the candidate to support our members. This is the candidate to support public safety. You know, and then they tried to gaslight their own members by sitting there and telling them, well, you know, we're not there. We're not concerning ourselves with crime. Crime's not an issue for our members. What's an issue for our members is health and safety and their pay. That's all we care about as a union. It's like, oh, so high crime doesn't affect the safety of your members, dude? And everyone just sat there like, yeah, okay. And I had all these PBA delegates calling me like, yeah, you guys aren't right. You guys aren't right. I'm like, oh, we're not right? Oh, you're listening to them? Okay, no problem. No problem. So, yeah, number 4, police unions. That's the reason assaults are up.
Honestly, I say it all the time. I think these police unions should be out of business. I think that everyone collectively has to get together and stop paying your union dues. You can get yourself a dental plan, a prescription plan, pretty affordable on a monthly basis, probably the same as what you're paying right now in dues. And if you need representation, you're going to get your own attorney anyway. It's, these attorneys that you get for a CCRB interview or a GO15, if anyone is outside New York City, which is a general order 15, where they have the tape recorder and they're investigating you, you get representation there for maybe 3 minutes before you actually speak. It's absolutely, you could do that on your own. But if you're actually in a real pickle, you'll get your own attorney, which is why we need more like coalitions where you could have money put into a pot and to represent you when you're in a real pickle. But the unions are absolutely self-serving. They're there to benefit you. It must be great to be a union member. I mean, these guys stay forever. If they could stay to 70 years old, they would, because they're eating well. The job is great. They're there in a suit. They're warm when it's cold out, and they're cool when it's hot out. And you're out there sucking wind. You got the same raise that you got for not having to wear a body camera. They got the same raise that you got for not having to distribute right to know cards, business cards. So they're not under the thumb that you are. And what's the big deal? They pack the courtroom. They shouldn't have to pack a courtroom. If they were actually standing up and fighting for you tooth and nail, maybe they wouldn't have to pack a courtroom because you're being charged with a crime. Maybe if they actually weren't in bed with the enemy and supporting politicians that are polarizing to you, maybe they wouldn't have a courtroom. So why don't we talk about the issues that actually led to the PBA having to pack a courtroom? Why don't we address the actual root causes that actually led to police officers being charged and actually talk about the real issues and actually put the money to address them?
So yeah, they don't talk about it because it's too hard. Nobody wants to have that conversation, and then they would anger their masters in politics. And then I would think that the fifth reason is the politicians. So I blame the leadership and the unions more than I blame the politicians who put these policies in place, because they help them. Another clear example of that is the Detective Endowment Association. Detective Endowment Association holds a poll. They're going to bring their members into the political arena, is what the Detectives Endowment Association president Scott Monroe said on One Tough podcast to listen to on 77 WABC. That's Bo Dietl's podcast. So he said, yeah, we're going to bring our members into the political arena, and we want to see who they want to endorse for the presidential election. So all the ballots were due back on September 5th. Today is October 14th. All of the ballots have been accounted for. It's October 14th, and the DEA has not endorsed anyone. And now the DEA trustee from the DEA reached out to me on my Instagram when I started making waves about it, saying, where's the results of the polls? And he said they were just trying to get a feel. They weren't actually going to endorse anybody, even though the president said they were bringing their membership into the political arena. So it's rumored that 95% of the Detectives Endowment Association voted to endorse, guess who? The only presidential candidate that supports law enforcement, Donald J. Trump. Shocker, right? Shouldn't shock anyone. And I guess there was so much support for him that the DEA doesn't want to now release the poll or endorse anyone for the president, which is a slap in the face to their members. It's more gaslighting to the members. And again, having Kamala Harris be the president of the United States makes the job more dangerous for police officers, because the open borders that she oversaw has led to an influx in gangs coming into New York City and in this nation that are also directly involved in assaulting police officers and have no fear and no respect of police officers. So, I mean, I think right now, if you're a member of the DEA, if you're a retired member, if you're an active member of the DEA, you should be demanding that whether they endorse or they don't endorse, they release the results of that poll so that the American public knows who the rank and file actually support. The fact that they did that is just further gaslighting. So that's why I put the unions behind the leadership, but I put them before the politicians that actually enacted these policies that embolden criminals.
Absolutely. That's what I've been saying. We have to look at what's going on within. We need support within the leadership, and the unions are also supposed to be a form of leadership when it comes to the police department. They're supposed to lead their members to their benefits, lead the members to their safety, lead the members to their wellness. So there's always going to be politicians that are anti-police, just don't understand, create legislation that makes it difficult for police, even during good times. There's always going to be legislation that handicaps your job and makes it difficult, and we have to maneuver through that. There's always going to be public opinion, especially when it comes to policing. It's the most critical profession that we've ever seen, right? The armchair critics. So what do we need to be effective? And we're always going to have district attorneys that are on board or they're not. What do we need from the police department? We need ultimate support. We need a backbone. We need leadership to back the police officers. We need the unions to say, hey, we will defend our members tooth and nail. We will support them. We will protect them from civil liabilities. We will have them out there doing their job. Why don't the unions take some of their money and say, you know what? We're going to get our members discounted rates and paid for to the gym of their choice where they live. We're working with different jiu-jitsu schools or wrestling schools or Muay Thai schools to get our police officers training. We're going to make sure
they do, but they're only on Long Island. None of them are.
Well, I guess it doesn't matter, right? Exactly. It's funny you say that. It's always Long Island. I guess all the union members live in Long Island. But John Ranger says the 5% that did support Trump are probably specialists that paid $5,000 for that rank. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. I think you're right. But again, the unions have failed. I think the unions should be out of business. They really, there's no longer a use for these unions. Maybe at one time there was. We discussed this, but right now, absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's bad. You know, it's a sad state of affairs. What's going on? So I don't think any of this in the current leadership model of New York City, from the mayor down to the police commissioner, down to the appointed management of the NYPD, including the unions, I don't think there's a way for this to even cease or stop. There's no effective crime control strategy that's going to work because they haven't presented one. It's been a while now with this administration. It's been almost 3 years. The only thing we've seen is corruption coming out of the Adams administration and his appointees, and all we see them is still them cheerleading for the first indicted mayor in New York City history. So unfortunately for you guys out there, stay safe. I don't see an end in sight to this, though. I expect this rise to continue. I expect this rise to continue in actuality. In the numbers, I expect a drop because they will misreport the assaults against cops like they've been doing for the last 20 years. So overall, in reality, the numbers will continue to rise. Whether they reflect so on paper or not is remain to be seen. Because I think even the 1975 is a low number, and I think it's underreported. I don't even think that's an accurate number because traditionally cops know when you're assaulted out there on the streets in New York, they're doing anything and everything but looking to charge someone with assault on a police officer. And I'm talking about the internal New York City Police Department, the supervision inside the police department. I'm not talking about any outside factors. We eat our own, and that's the clearest way. This number is not even accurate.
Hands down, spot on. Absolutely. The number is definitely higher. We know that commanding officers will suppress in every ability and every might that they have to suppress these assaults. So to have 1,975 assaults, they must have been pretty substantial, because if you have something that's on the cusp, it's kind of borderline, well, the police officer wasn't really terribly injured, it's a minor injury, they'll go resisting arrest, and they'll do whatever they can in their power to suppress these index crimes. I always thought it was the most ridiculous thing. A majority of the commanding officers that I worked for, that throughout the tour, and I'm sure a lot of police officers know exactly what I'm talking about, I wonder if it goes on still at this point, and it probably still does, that if there's an index crime in the tour, these commanding officers, even if they're not at work, they want to be texted right away. And that's absolutely ridiculous. Why is that done? They want to know right away because they want to do everything in their power to suppress these index crimes so they're not charged as felonies. That's why I say right now, if you're working in crime analysis, protect yourself, because if the following day you're going to be calling complaints to try to downgrade these crimes, the commanding officer, God forbid this ever goes to this is ever questioned, they're not going to back you. The liability is going to be on you. So if you're in crime analysis, and if you're put in those positions, don't do it. Protect yourself.
All right, people, we're going on 2 hours. We got 932 people on here. We appreciate you guys. We'll try to get to all your questions and comments. I did see a question in here about Wiener's laptop. We have no information on that whatsoever. It's definitely a question worthy of answering. But I know for a fact that some people that committed suicide during that time did not work in a capacity where they would be able to see that laptop. So I think a lot of that, there's definitely some smoke there that needs to be investigated, but we don't have any firsthand knowledge of that whatsoever. But I would like to see what was on Anthony Weiner's laptop also. So, all right, let's switch topics. The assaults we expect to continue to rise. We gave you our reasonings for it. let's go on a little corruption before we get out. We're going to go for about another 20 minutes and we're going to get out of here. But NYPD chiefs accused of steering funds to restaurant of ex-commissioner's brother, whistleblower. Before we get this out, we have filed a complaint on the NYPD, upper echelon of the NYPD, along with the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau, along with the mayor of the city of New York, along with numerous other elected officials. And some of what we alleged was that they were also criminally associating with a mob associate who they sent to threaten me. Came out online, said he was going to see me, did all these things. And I'm like, where'd this guy come from? Why did he get my name? And why is he threatening me online? And that was the business partner of the ex-police commissioner's brother, and who at this restaurant that they talked about. So this complaint from DOI is not us. We never accused any chiefs of steering funds to the restaurant. We did say that the NYPD held functions there and criminally associated with it. We were talking about the upper echelon, and that they failed to do the required checks on the restaurant, which everyone would know. When you hold a police event, you're required to get an IAB log number. You're required to call Internal Affairs Bureau, and you're required to get a check of the business from Intel. Apparently, this was not done. Couple of these flyers had the Internal Affairs Bureau logo on it, not a podcast, not a log number, which is required, which is concerning. And it's truly concerning because there was a lot of open violations concerning this restaurant that were unaddressed. And so, we made some allegation, but it wasn't this allegation. The Sal Greco also filed a DOI complaint, and I forget what his complaint was, but it also was not this. It also was not that chiefs were accused of steering funds to a restaurant of an ex-police commissioner's brother. So we're going to get into the article, but I just want to clear the air before all of you think it's either us or Sal. It wasn't. It absolutely was not. But it's valid and it's concerning. And we also did say that it should be a conflict of interest that any members of the NYPD are doing business with the police commissioner's brother, right? Concerning. And just another point of clarification, this brother is not the brother that's being accused of the shakedown racketeering operation of nightlife businesses. So, Eric, what do you think when you're reading this? Like, before we get into the article, like, what did you think when you first saw this?
I thought the same thing. Like, oh, here we go. Right away, people are going to assume that Sal Greco or myself or you had our finger on this. Absolutely not. It just shows right now there's so many facets going on right now with this administration, especially the upper echelon. There's so many probes and so many allegations of corruption and so many different appearances of impropriety. But I will say this. Sal Greco was right. The Controversies definitely plays a part when it comes to level of corruption. We even had Jimmy Rodriguez, who is really the de facto owner and manager of Controversies, who was a known criminal himself, contact John McCary online and try to intimidate and cause some threats, which of course we didn't take too lightly. But at the same token, this is very concerning. I myself, I actually put a post out to Victoria Perry because Victoria Perry, I said you shouldn't throw stones when you live in a glass house. Of course, is referring to this podcast as racist while she's getting her fingers sticky herself, possibly, potentially. It looks as though that this has some teeth to it. So what do we all know about this? I threw a 1013 function for one of my police officers back in 2016. And one of my police officers, actually, I was a lieutenant this time, but when I was a sergeant, one of my crime guys, was suffering from leukemia. So myself and two other police officers, we got together, we threw a 1013, and the hoops that we had to jump through, it was unbelievable. We had to get log numbers from the Intelligence Bureau, log numbers from Internal Affairs, to send all the documentation. There had to be a warrant check on the representative of the bar restaurant that we held the function. We had to show where all the money was coming from, all the funds. We had to show who was the recipient. How did the recipient get these funds? And there was just so many hoops to get this 1013 function authorized, and so many hoops to jump through to show that everything was valid and everything was on the up and up. And then here we go. And that's why I said also to Victoria Perry, on Twitter, did you have to jump through the same hoops that I did? Because apparently not. And here's another appearance of impropriety. Again, rules for thee and rules not for me.
Yeah, so, all right, let's get into it. A whistleblower is accusing the police brass of steering funds to a Bronx restaurant owned by the brother of former police commissioner Edward Caban, according to a complaint filed with the City Department of Investigation. So, again, they shouldn't. No one in the city should have been doing business with the city of New York, because you're not allowed to do. Your family's not allowed to do business with the city of New York if you're a high-ranking official in New York City. And honestly, it's technically not allowed even if you're a cop, even if you're a nobody cop who can't do anything. Never mind the police commissioner. So, Deputy Chiefs Maximo Tolentino and Victoria Perry directed the funds to be used for community parties at Con Sofrito, which is owned by Richard Caban, a retired NYPD lieutenant, the complaint states. The bosses, who were both in community affairs, allegedly told the cops under their command to focus on doing events at Con Sofrito and use all resources available to make the big boss happy, the complaint states, referring to then Commissioner Caban. 5% for the big guy. There's Victoria Perry, who organization Noble had also attacked this podcast and tried to make inflammatory claims that we were racist about memes that were satirical memes that were based upon the racist statements of Eric Adams and some deputy commissioners in the NYPD. One notably, what was her name? We just talked about her, Tanya Meisenholder, who called us knuckle draggers. So, yeah, so we did some satirical memes, but we were racist. They weren't. So here's a picture of. So on your right, you have Richard Caban, who's the owner of the restaurant. In the middle, you have James Caban, who is the man who's being accused of running an extortion racketeering ring, shaking down businesses, using his police escort and the authority from his to the left of him. In the middle, the brother Edward Caban, the mob associate who decided to threaten me with a post where he had Fat Joe tagged and all these other people commenting on it. He's not pictured here. So the allegations in the DOI complaint were also made to federal investigators, a police source said. The events at the Commerce Avenue Eatery took place between October of 22 and January of 23. The parties cost between $5,000 and $8,000, the source said. Among the Community Affair Bureau events, there was a Winter Wonderland where officers distributed toys to the children, to the complaint and social media posts. They misused and ordered the misuse of city resources, the police source said, adding that Perry was recently promoted to chief and was received a pay bump. So here's the flyer here from the Community Affairs Bureau. If you look to the right here, you'll see that that is the logo for the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau, as well as Rafael Salamanca Jr., who's the land chair for city council. He's in charge of the committee for land use. And again, this establishment was not paying their rent to the owner of the establishment. They had numerous fire and building code violations that they did not take care of. I forget what the word that they use. They did not alleviate it. They did not cure. So they allowed those things to sit. They probably should have been shut down and they were allowed to operate. So Salamanca, the land share, should have known that. The IOB's Internal Affairs Bureau should have known that, as well as there were numerous complaints made about the establishment as well. I believe some of them involving sex trafficking that were made to the that were made to the NYPD's Vice Division that were forwarded. So there are numerous issues with this place, numerous reasons, including the fact that this should be looked at as a conflict of interest when you're looking at city charter rules when it relates to doing business with the city. So numerous issues surrounding this place, and nobody cared because nobody checked. And what you see missing from here is an IAB log number, which is required for the flyer. So Perry made about $214,000 in 2023. That is a lot less than Kaz Daughtry made, right? It was over $300,000 salary. And Tolentino, as a deputy chief, made $233,000, still a lot less than Kaz Daughtry. Rumors circulated Friday that Perry's electronics were seized by investigators, but the NYPD's Public Information Office denied that. It did not immediately respond when asked about the DOI complaint. The DOI didn't immediately respond to post inquiries, nor did Perry and Tolentino. Caban's twin brother, James Caban, is being eyed by the feds for his alleged work as a fixer for swanky restaurants and nightclubs in Manhattan, where he allegedly helped smooth things over between businesses and cops, giving them trouble. There are 5 investigations into Mayor Eric Adams' inner circle.
Well, so this substantiates our complaint. So initially, John and I made a complaint to the Internal Affairs Bureau about the upper echelon of the police department, about Khaki Pants Unit, about us being attacked by a fake moniker, threatening the lives of us and our children, which some real disturbing pictures of people with picture of zip ties and a map to Florida indicating that they're coming to kill myself and John, which is fine, but then they threatened their families. But what we were initially told by the Internal Affairs Bureau is that the Internal Affairs Bureau did not participate at any events at Casa Fritos, which is a complete lie, because that was our first question. Our first question of the investigations, we wanted to make sure that there was the Internal Affairs Bureau was not compromised and that this would be a proper investigation, which we suspected would not be. But we were told specifically in the email, which we read at a prior podcast, that no one from the Internal Affairs Bureau has participated at an event at Casa Fritos. Because Casa Fritos did come up in our complaint as well with the threats to John McCary from Jimmy Rodriguez while they're consorting with the upper echelon of the police department, notably Ed Caban, the former police commissioner himself. So sure enough, Internal Affairs Bureau, their logo is on this flyer. There was a picture that surfaced with Chief Iglesias at Casa Fritos, just a complete lie. Internal Affairs Bureau cannot investigate themselves. Again, it's not surprising that Victoria Perry or maybe Maximo himself has to have funds going to Casa Fritos to supplement their pockets, when Kaz Daughtry is making significantly about 100,000, maybe more than their counterparts. So Victoria Perry is making about 100,000 less than a detective that was elevated by rocket fuel to deputy commissioner of operations. So maybe that's why they're looking for funding and private contracts out there.
Yeah, and Frank Cesario brings up a great point about Pat Lynch also had a retirement party there as well. So all the unions were involved too. And then actually, I believe that happened after we were threatened. Like all of that stuff happened after we were threatened and we made allegations about the place, which is insane. Insane to think. Sal says people should, instead of worrying about whether myself, John, or Eric made the complaint, worry about the actual criminality that occurred in the place. This seems to be the Ravenite of this crime family. Yeah, by all means, it looks like Eric Adams is running a crime syndicate in New York City, and this is just more dirtbag allegations that are coming out. It's like, oh yeah, you have to have your party here. We're not, no enforcement's being done. And I think the one part in this article that the Post missed is that it wasn't that they were just selling protection from the NYPD. The allegation is that they're selling protection from the New York State Liquor Authority, the Department of Buildings, and the Fire Department as well, which would mean that this is brought up in a widespread corruption allegation that involves both state and city. Widespread web of corruption looming over New York. I think that's something that keeps getting missed. The media keeps not honing in on that portion of it, is that like there were all of these other agencies involved in this actual racket, and what stemmed from that protection racket. We got to remember how that happened. New York City mayor ended the March program, which NYPD used to do with numerous other agencies, Department of Building, Fire Department. It's called the multi-agency response team. We would go out, and that was done at a precinct level. SOL would determine, based upon the number of complaints, based upon community complaints, if a inspection was warranted at an establishment, and then we'd call up, these other agencies, get involved and conduct an operation there to make sure that the place was up to snuff. They were operating within code. They weren't selling bad food, bad alcohol, the fire code. They were following fire code, the building code. All of these other agencies would be there. And Eric Adams said that was bad. He said that was bad. He said we were harming businesses. He said that we were shuttering businesses. And instead, he wanted to cure businesses. He wanted to go out and warn businesses and cure them. So he shut down the March program, which we raised eyebrows about when he did. We said that's very strange to do. It's a very weird thing. It looks to be corruption prone by doing this. And what he did is he put in place what's called the Cure program. And the Cure program was supposed to help businesses come up to snuff in order to not shutter businesses, which is in direct conflict with what the sheriff is doing when it's related to those individuals who are accused of selling illegal marijuana in a city that marijuana is legal. So it's in direct conflict to that. And the Cure program falls out on this office that Eric Adams created, the Office of the Nightlife. And the Office of the Nightlife was put in place so that if you're having a problem, you reach out to this office and they'll help you to cure the problems you're having with the NYPD. So one Brooklyn club owner in Coney Island reached out to the Office of the Nightlife. He spoke with a gentleman named Ray Martin. Ray Martin has since been fired from the Office of the Nightlife by New York City Mayor Eric Adams after it came out that when this bar owner, Chamel's his first name, I forget his last name, but Chamel reaches out to Ray Martin in an official capacity to the Office of the Nightlife. He says, I'm having problems. Like the NYPD keeps summoning me. I want to see what I could do to correct this, what I could do to operate legally and keep the police enforcement away from my business. Like, what could I do? I just want to operate my business and feed my family. Chamel Kelly is his name. And so he reaches out to Ray Martin, and Ray Martin says, there's nothing I could do to help you. You have to reach out to this guy. And he gives James Caban's cell phone number. And James Caban says, yeah, I'll help you out. Just give me $2,500. So the Office of the Nightlife appeared to be helping in this extortion racket. And that's what people have to put into play. It wasn't just the police commissioner. It wasn't just the NYPD. It was also the mayor's office. It was also people in the state. So that's what consistently gets missed here.
Oh, absolutely right. Hey, Sal Greg says, the allegations I have understood is cops would go to Consafrito to pay whoever it was to get their essay paid or detective promotion in the NYPD. This is one of the drop-off spots, allegedly. Now, I'll say this. I don't believe in coincidence. We have Consafritos has been at the center of numerous potential allegations and the appearance of impropriety. We have numerous events being held there. It's a known place where known criminals hang out. While Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated for his association with Roger Stone, while we have Eric Adams, along with high prolific politicians of New York State, not just New York City, of New York State, that have attended Consafritos numerous times and engaged in photos with Jimmy Rodriguez, who's a known criminal himself, has a criminal history, which completely violates NYPD policy. It's just not appearance good. That's a good appearance for the public. We also have, while John and I were under attack, we have a detective from the 4-5 Precinct Detective Squad trying to find out why we're making a complaint, calling us rats, finding out what's going on with all cops and all.
Knew we made a complaint, right? Knew yes. Almost immediately upon us filing the complaint, knew we made the complaint.
Absolutely. Right. Found out from internal affairs that we made a complaint. And where is Consafritos located? In the 4-5 precinct. So a detective that we've never met in our entire careers contacted John and myself and very concerned about all cops are woke. And yet this detective also claimed that all cops are woke was a young girl, a 16-year-old girl from Nebraska. So that's another problem. If that was true, why is a detective in the 4-5 precinct associating with a 16-year-old girl in Nebraska? So Consafritos has been at the forefront for appearance of impropriety. It doesn't look good. It's terrible. They violate NYPD policy. And again, I threw a 1013 function myself. I know the hoops that you have to jump through to have these authorized. So internal affairs is no longer capable to police themselves. How could internal affairs actually have an event there themselves where it shouldn't even be authorized when we have numerous felons and criminals hanging around with high politicians. It's absolutely ridiculous. Terrible look. And again, there's just so many different facets, and we see so many different angles of potential corruption. Something's going to stick. There's absolutely some teeth here. It's absolutely ridiculous.
100%. Seth Lowe, I see you asking about the mandates. Just so you're aware, no cops have been reinstated. None. Not one. Not one has been reinstated with back pay. Any cops that went back to work signed a waiver that they would give away their civil service rights, even though no one knows what that means, and they would give up their right to back pay. The fight goes on. We'll do a podcast about that in the near future. I'm reading through a couple of different court cases now that I found very interesting. But right now we're talking, and again, that the whole mandate is surrounded in corruption as well. And again, like I've always said, Eric Adams' inner circle was not subjected to the mandate. The NYPD, who forced this upon people, the upper echelon, also were not subjected to it. So that's also corruption. But we're talking about the corruption on the outside, not related to its members, but corruption, how they were dealing with illegal businesses and criminal associates. So we'll get into that another thing. But to date, not one officer has ever been reinstated in the NYPD. People have won cases and they have not received their back pay or their time or anything else. So the fight goes on with that. But yeah, the other allegation is not only were they getting promotions, so that not only the other allegation is that members of Eric Adams' circle were selling NYPD promotions, but they were selling NYPD transfers as well. So you had to pay to get transferred as well. So I think that's another thing. You're just seeing a stem of dirtiness around these people, like low integrity individuals and real dirtbag crimes. It appears that everything in New York City was for sale. And it just reminds me of the scene in Goodfellas when the guy asked Paulie in Goodfellas to be his business partner, and then they show that they run up all the bills on the credit of the business, and they're buying washer and dryers are coming in the front door and they're selling at half price out the back. That's what was happening, appears to be happening in Eric Adams' administration. Everything's for sale. Everything's a fire sale. It didn't matter. Nobody's paying for it anyway. And that's what you're seeing. Every appointment is shrouded in mystery. Every appointment. It's not defamation, Juju. It's my opinion. My opinion is they're a bunch of dirtbag skells who should have never been appointed in any place, and Eric Adams should have never been the mayor. That's my opinion. Sue me all you want, because I'll say it on the stand. They're a bunch of dirtbag skells that should have never been appointed to the position they were in, and their history dictates that.
Yeah, please put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to sue us, just send it already. I'll give you my address and tell you where to send it to. Please. Bunch of nonsense. Anyway, listen, I tell you right now, anyone that paid for a promotion, you're a bum. If you received money for someone to get promoted, you're a bum. If you're hanging out with criminals at Controversies, knowing that Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated for the same thing, you're a bum. If you're internal affairs right now and you're not allowing these investigations to properly play out because of the upper echelon and you're timid to actually do your investigation properly, you're a bum. Everyone right now is a bum if you're taking part of this. Get all these bums out. I'm telling you right now, a majority of the upper echelon, I would say, no, I'm sorry. The entire upper echelon of the police department has been compromised. I've been saying that, and I still believe in that. But a majority of the job is compromised. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm curious also, internal affairs. How does a 4 or 5 precinct detective squad contact John and myself when Controversies is there? There's no coincidence. You know, is he muscle for that place? I find it surprising. I mean, I don't want to say it. He was a big P. You know, I don't want to say it on this podcast here, but I can't see him being muscle. He's a total weak coward. But anyway, there's no coincidence here.
Yeah, there's absolutely no coincidence. What was the other thing? There's one more thing I wanted to bring up.
There's so much corruption. We can't even figure out so much potential corruption. We can't remember how many. That's how crazy it is that on a daily basis, it's like Jack in the Box. Oh, what other potential corruption do we have for the police department right now? You know, apparently, I want to know what is, you know, right now, if people are getting gifts, if getting Porsches as gifts, what's Kris Kringle going to look like for Christmas time when it comes to the police department? What are they going to be giving each other? Porsches? I'll get you a Porsche. You give me a restaurant. This is insane.
Listen, last thing, I kind of want to bring this up. I know we've been going a while, and we do have to get off. We have another appointment in like 20 minutes. So if we could do this one quick, but I think this one needs to come up today before it comes out. So, it's expected Donlin was supposed to resign on Friday. Tish is going to be named as police commissioner. None of that happened. I think that's going to happen. I just think they're playing games here. But Kaz Daughtry puts this out, and it's about Roosevelt Avenue. This is about the 5th time they've done these things at Roosevelt Avenue. So he puts this tweet out. He says, public safety is not ensured by sitting behind a desk. Last night, I walked Roosevelt Avenue with NYPD PC Donlin. We heard the community's concerns firsthand, and we witnesses the challenge they face. We are proud to lead your dedicated officers in addressing these issues, and we will continue to hold the promises to protect and serve. So here's the video that the NYPD puts out. They open it up just like we open this podcast up. We open and close the podcast up. So you guys are welcome for that. I don't know if we should sue for copyright infringement on that, but let's play the video and then let's just get your thoughts about what's going on here. Ready? Listen to it. Whoosh, same thing as this podcast.
Right now we're on Roosevelt Avenue. It's about 7:15, 7:30. And as I was briefing the commissioner early this morning around 9 o'clock, when I came into One Police Plaza, immediately he asked me about Roosevelt Avenue. I gave him a quick update synopsis from crime to quality of life conditions that we're seeing on Roosevelt Avenue. And he said, Kaz, I want to go out there tonight and see what you're seeing. So, Commissioner, as you can see, he's very concerned of what's going on Roosevelt Avenue. We got the borough commander here, Christine Berstenbach, the Queens North commander. Christine, can you just give the commissioner an overview of exactly what's happening?
What goes on Roosevelt Avenue is a lot of different conditions here. If you take a look around, you'll see that we have folks that are vending on the corners. You'll see women that are scantily clad on the street, offering services of massages. So we do have a lot of prostitution that goes on here. It is a team effort that we use here with our patrol officers, our vice officers. A really big collaboration to really address the issues that are going on here.
This past week, I've met personally with a number of the chiefs, and chief of detectives, and Kaz and patrol, and we're going to provide more resources to you here. We've always taken it serious, but we're gonna kick up to another level. And I'm out here for the first time, but I want to come out here again. Once a week, twice a week. Because this is very, very important. And the public wants to see, how we're addressing this. And it doesn't go unnoticed when you and your officers and Kaz and others come here to show that we do care. And we truly do. It's in our DNA, and this is why we're in the business we're in. So
Agreed.
You're doing a great job, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
First of all, get these bums out of here. Are you kidding me with this stage photo op and stage media tours that they do? It's so artificial. It's not organic. If you're out there, if you really care about the people, do you really need a film crew to put out your names and label and this whole walk off? Oh my God, this is ridiculous. Just go out there and hit the ground, the pavement. And if the media wants to come out and film you, let them put it out there. But to have a stage photo op and say, all right, we're going to go out there and pretend we care, and we're going to have the cameras and put our names up because you want to be a celebrity. This whole self-serving stage photo op and media tour just keeps continuing. This is ridiculous. Ron Lason makes a great point. Her name is Christine Berstenbach. He doesn't even know the borough commander's name. They don't even know her name. She's the borough commander. Don't even know it. It's such a stage photo op, stage media tour. This is ridiculous. It looks so silly. Again, Kaz Daughtry, thanks for biting off on this podcast. Small podcast, big steps, brother.
Oh, it's absolutely. I think this is the 4th time I've seen them do this. I think that this police commissioner, this interim police commissioner, Tom Sullivan, he can't step down soon enough. He is completely useless. It's a completely waste of appointment. He's done nothing. He's made no changes to the upper echelon of the NYPD. If the upper echelon of the NYPD was involved in a protection racketeering scandal, and that led the former police commissioner, Edward Caban, to resign, There needed to be changes effective immediately. He hasn't even moved people out of the PC's office. He's done absolutely nothing. This guy is completely useless. He's completely emasculated. He's done nothing. So this is a whole photo op that's been done over and over again. Kaz has been out here with a ton of guys. You could see the look in the cops' faces. I think that's the end all be all. They just only put that up for 2 seconds because when they show the cops that are out there, you could tell they're completely disconnected. They don't want to be there. They have no interest in being there. It was like a split second. I'm gonna pull up where that was, but they don't care at all. Kaz doesn't even know the borough commander's name. He doesn't even know her name. He calls her something else, not by her name. I forget what he called her, but it wasn't correct. Completely detached. They have no idea. They're basically doing nothing. What they're doing is this is their response to it. Here they go. Let's make the community feel good. Let's make the community feel good because we show up here with the news cameras and we do these. And our security teams, our numerous security teams, by the way, and you could tell that they're having problems even filming. You could tell they're having problems even filming on the street. So there's prostitution, there's drugs being sold, and what they're doing is this. They're holding a staged photo op. There's a reason that this photo is only there for a split second because you could tell these people are also completely unattached, detached. They know what this is. This is a game. They're not looking to clean up anything. Everything is for optics.
You're absolutely right. It's for optics and it's also self-serving. It's to build the ego of Kaz. I mean, Kaz is not even addressed as deputy commissioner. He's addressed as Kaz. I mean, Kaz is like he's his own hero in his own movie, and that's what this is. This is another stage op, another staged media tour where Kaz gets to be the hero in his own movie, and that's what this is about. It's completely about him having celebrity status. They don't really care what's going on. I feel sorry for that borough commander. She looked put in that spot and forced to do that while she could be out there actually just doing her job instead of a stage photo op. And then, again, the interim police commissioner playing to it also, pretending that, oh, that's my first time. Yeah, this is really important. Of course it's important. Can you offer something in detail, something specific? Of course it's important. The quality of life is diminished right now for the people that live there. They have young children that have to walk down Roosevelt Avenue and see women dressed as prostitutes. It's alarming for kids. It's a horrible environment. We have illegal military age males, and we're out there doing photo ops so that Kaz Daughtry could be the hero in his own movie. How do we know he wants to be the hero in his movie? Just look at the chair he had with the Captain America and his PlayStation on several podcasts we've done prior.
Yeah, no, it's funny. And then I watched a town hall the other day. I don't have it up, but I watched a town hall the other day, and one of the residents was asking about this. And I don't know, Kaz just started saying, we're out there. You don't see us, but we're there. We're involved in all these investigations. And Shell was sitting there, and he was furious. I got to find that town hall. He was absolutely furious at Kaz's response. It was hysterical. But like this has been going on basically the majority of Eric Adams' administration, and the only thing that they could come up with is going out there on a media tour and doing absolutely nothing. They did a bunch of raids, I think, back in January, and they did a media tour how they're not going to stand this and this isn't going to happen. And they did a bunch of raids, and the majority of those places are open again, still involved in prostitution, drug sales, and everything else. So again, it's always just gaslighting. It's just complete gaslighting. And this, obviously they don't have any crime control strategies. There's nothing in place. And this commission is a joke. I mean, he can't step down soon enough. Rumors were it was last Friday he was supposed to step down. I wouldn't be shocked if it's before this Friday. So.
Well, I think that right now this media tour, also the stage photo op, honestly, I think this is just a way to keep up appearances right now because the rumor has been out publicly that he's going to step down. There's going to be a new police commissioner. We have openly spoke about this podcast, and we know that they monitor this podcast. So I think that they're also trying to keep up appearances and say, hey, it's basically like an FU to this podcast saying, oh, he's not going anywhere. He is the police commissioner. And honestly, I care less what you guys think. We don't care. We're going to give our opinion. And if you think it's defamation, sue us, please. I like you said, I'm traveling by RV. If you want, I'll give you my address. so you can send it to wherever I'm at with the RV, and I'll take it. Be no problem. I mean, but again, this is just ridiculous. This is a stage photo op. It doesn't do anything for the. All it does is serve their egos. This is a waste of time. It's a waste of taxpayer money. It's a waste for the cops to have to stand through this when they could do real police work. And again, you know, they went and they did a little photo op about a raid. And they went out and they arrested some female prostitutes and they arrested some Johns. And it sounds great, right? There's a couple of arrests, but those are low-hanging fruits. Why don't we get to the actual root cause of the problem, that we have illegal military-age males in this area? We have women that are being human trafficked and they're forced to do this. Why don't we get to the root cause of it? Why don't we work with our fellow partners so we can figure out how these women are being trapped and stop it from the head, and not stop just making these arrests of low-hanging fruits? It doesn't do anything. It's just a Band-Aid for a night. It doesn't stop anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Marlon Bethel, he says that their crime control strategy is perception management. 100%. Nailed it. If you guys aren't following Marlon, definitely follow him. Marlon was wrongfully terminated for absolutely no reason. A 16-year intelligence detective in the NYPD. He was terminated because he would not bow down to Eric Adams and put this in his body if he wanted to work again. So he stood up on moral principle. He stood up in integrity, and he was terminated for the New York City Police Department non-disciplinary and never offered to be reinstated or have his job back. NYPD has never reached out to him, nor has the Detective Endowment Association. Absolute disgrace, and to the city of yes, because what they've done is absolutely horrific. But definitely follow Marlon on X. But he says that their crime control strategy is perception management. And that's everything that they're doing, right? They're attacking any dissenting voices, whether it be in the media, whether it be this podcast, whether it be on social media. And then what they do is, like John Schell had stated numerous times, we will control the narrative. That is not what your tax dollars are going to the New York City Police Department. They're not going for the New York City Police Department to control the narrative, John. They're doing there for you to provide public safety, not gaslight the public, and which is what is happening here. And when you guys are gaslighting the public, you should gaslight them enough to make it show that the people that you have appointed are competent enough to understand who is in charge. So this woman is in charge of Queens. The least that the deputy commissioner of operations can do is pronounce her name properly, and he couldn't even do that. And that stems, and he didn't even know what her name is. So, you know, he's in his own field running around. It must have been, you know, he's playing video games and all this other thing to take concern for who works underneath him. And again, 100%, that is exactly what's going on is perception management.
Well, I think we should close on that. I think Marlon hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're 2 hours and 45 minutes into it. I want to thank all our friends and listeners on the podcast for being with us today. You see it here. It's a stage photo op. It's a media tour. It's very self-serving. It's self-serving on the leadership of the police department. It's self-serving on the unions. Drone Ranger says during impact era, there were 200 cops assigned along Roosevelt Avenue from 73rd Street to 104th Street from 1700 to 06 hours. They tried to reimagine the wheel only to realize the round rubber thing works. It's absolutely right. We see the same horse, just a different color. Sometimes if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's intrusive police work. It's impact. It's having these police officers out making a real presence, not a media tour. Again, the unions have failed us. That's why we see the leadership and the unions, which should be leadership to the cops, have failed. That's why we have low morale. That's why we have a pandemic of suicide. That's why we have crime in the streets. That's why we have police officers getting assaulted because failed leadership. So again, thank you, friends and listeners. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for weighing in with us. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, 8:05 Eastern Time, 5:05 in the morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you, everyone. John, let's close it out to our friend Tom Sullivan.
Sure, absolutely. We're going to try to get, we've been in contact with Shamel Kelly, the owner of that Brooklyn bar. So he should be on this week. We also have a recorded episode with Sergeant Stephen Lee. We haven't decided when we're going to release that. We're going to start to promote it, though. That was a good, insightful interview, I think, into internal affairs and the corruption inside of the NYPD. So, yeah, we'll release that at some point. But possibly tomorrow or this week, we'll have Shamel Kelly, the Brooklyn bar owner who claims to be extorted by former police commissioner Edward Caban's brother, will join us on this podcast. So if you guys have any questions, get ready. So, but like we always say, everything that we're seeing is a politically created crisis. Get involved. Check out our good friend Tom Sullivan. We'll be back at you 8:05 live tomorrow to Finance Unfiltered. Tom Sullivan is the Republican, Conservative, and Common Sense Party candidate for New York State Assembly District 23. Tom is a financial professional who served simultaneously in the United States Army Reserve for 30 years and has now retired. His district covers Ozone Park, Lindenwold, Howard Beach, Broad Channel, and the Rockaway Peninsula.
Come November, I would empower our law enforcement agencies to go out there and do their job and not put them or their families or their pensions at risk for doing their jobs. We need drastic change in Albany so that we have a say in this matter, and they realize people of New York State will hold them accountable.
The Sullivan family has a legacy of service. Tom served for 30 years protecting and defending the rights of others. Come this November, he has earned your support. This advertisement's paid for by the Friends of Tom Sullivan.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.